rooms up top. I never been up there.
No, I've only been in the lower room, I guess.
I didn't. I was 2 o'clock before I knew there was a party going on down the hall.
No, were you there, Ross?
No.
We
Nope.
were represented. Not
Good. Good.
I thought it was a little long, but it was very well done.
They said 2 hours, and it was 2 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
So, you know.
I thought all the speakers, including
You ready?
representatives.
Yep. You
Yeah.
ready?
I'm ready. Let's see if
Call the Finance Committee meeting to order.
What am I, chopped liver?
yeah.
Where's your Where's your iPad?
I don't think I need it.
Oh, okay.
What?
All right. All members are present and accounted for. We have some business to take care of that we didn't do at the last meeting, which is to close the closed session. I have to read a statement. Pursuant to the requirements of the Annotated Code of Maryland General Provisions, Article 3-305B1, this statement is included in the minutes. A closed session of the Finance Committee was held on Wednesday, April 10th at 1:30 p.m. in the Mayor John T. Chamber Jr. City Council Chambers, 160 Duke of Gloucester Street, 2nd floor, Annapolis, Maryland. Members who voted to meet in the closed session are Alderman Payon, Alderwoman Finlayson, and Alderman Arnett. Persons attending the closed session: Acting Mayor Tierney, Chief of Staff Smith, Assistant Attorney Ashley Leonard, and City Clerk Regina Watkins Eldridge. The members present took a roll call vote and the session closed. The authority under which the session was closed was the Annotated Code of Maryland General Provisions, Article 3-305B1. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss the terms of the contract between the city and the former acting city attorney. No votes were taken in the closed session. Upon motion duly made, seconded, and adopted, the closed session was adjourned at 2:56 p.m.
Go to accept the minutes, or do
Well, the minutes are next, right? First is the approval of the agenda. So I had thought we were going to continue on with the CIP, but Director Gerald is not available today, and so the agenda is now to take up approval of the minutes and then get into the departmental discussions, starting with the Office of the Mayor and City Council. So first, let's go to approval. Well, so is there a discussion of the agenda or amendments?
Well, I do have a question. Can we implement a procedure in that when we don't finish an agenda, it automatically rolls into the next day without having to re-announce or republish a change of the agenda?
I think we have the right to do that. In this case, I was informed by the finance director that David Gerald would not be available.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we would have normally rolled over, but we can adopt any procedure we want to adopt as long as we adopt it.
And I'm not speaking to necessarily this situation with Director Gerald. I'm just saying in general.
In general, yes.
Because there was a question yesterday or the day before about whether we would create new agendas because we are behind now, or whether we will just, and I suggest that we just roll over whatever we don't finish on one day, we start with it the next day.
Right.
You know, so anyway. That.
So we've published specific agendas. So if you're going to change those, I believe you need to amend the agenda when it's before you on the floor. You could publish a less specific agenda so that next Monday's meeting, the agenda is budget review.
Okay.
Right? And then
Yeah. And that makes sense. If I don't know how we do that with giving the public enough information so they can respond to what is important. But if they know we're going to roll over whatever we don't finish, you know. So however we have to legally do it,
Well-
as long as we have something in place.
Perhaps at some point today, we ought to review all the upcoming agendas, and in fact, I would like to discuss with the committee, I don't think, and I had a discussion with Teresa yesterday, I don't see how we're going to finish in time to write our report, to give our recommendations to the council on May 13th, going at the pace we're going. And I had suggested to each of you at the end of the last meeting that we may want to focus on those things that are truly council policy kinds of questions. If there are some specific deep dives we want to get into in terms of a department or something like that, or matters that the committee feels we need to get into, but my recommendation is that we stay at a somewhat higher level. I'd like to have some discussion about the overall FTEs and the changes, and that may be relevant as it is for the first thing we're taking up today, but broad categories of the level of the budget, the level of components of the budget, and where we feel that there's some need to do a deep dive because we don't understand, or it's something new and we need to be comfortable. But we've got to find a way to move this along.
Mr. Chair, that date of May 13th or whatever it is self-imposed.
Yeah, it's in the code.
Well, no, we have to have our budget approved by the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, but the code clearly says that the Finance Committee has to report to the council writ large on the second Monday of the month of May.
Okay, well, then that's a new piece to the code, because there were times, yes, when we didn't have our final report until the end of May. And if you recall, we were having our public hearings and trying to get approval by the first meeting in June. So I'm sure the city manager will look that up for us. But
as I imprudently said to the city manager one time, and I continue to hear it back, follow the code.
Well,
if
but
the code isn't working, change the code.
Okay, but right now, if we don't get through by the 13th, we don't get through. So what's the punishment?
Well, there is no punishment, but it's a disservice to our colleagues, although I'm hoping they're not waiting for our report.
Really?
And I suspect they're not.
Okay, so...
And to that end, I've had discussion with a few colleagues. I would like to change the procedure, but we can do that in our report. I think we really, for the budget, ought to be meeting as a committee of the whole. So we don't have us taking our deep dive, getting all of the information from the departments, and then our other colleagues who can't be here have to get caught up, and they can they'll try to recover ground that's already been covered. And I think in order to do a committee of the whole, we're going to have meetings in the evening for all of the colleagues that work. And that also would make our meetings more available to the public. They could come if they should enjoy going through the T accounts and things like that. But that's for discussion
of another time.
Of another time.
Absolutely it is.
Right.
But we do have a responsibility as a finance committee.
We do.
And I would hope that all of our colleagues would respect the time that we put in and the considerations that we're giving. And it is up to them if they choose to. I mean, everything is televised. They can watch at any time. So it's not to cut them out of the process at all. But I think that we have to do what we have to do and not be rushed through and be negligent. And that's how I view it. But you're the chairperson, so whatever you tell us to do,
Alderman
we're going to
Savage.
Thank you. I do definitely, I actually agree. Just from a non-committee member's perspective, last year I think some of us did come together with additional budget proposals, and I think there was some criticism against us in terms of having something separate from the Finance Committee. So I'd like to, from my personal perspective, I'd like to try to avoid that this year and do as much as I can in the Finance Committee with the committee. But in terms of our timeline, I don't know if that's going to be feasible or not with that first week of May. Because I think you're right, Mr. Chair, that I think it would be good to have some other larger evening meetings with the rest of the council to kind of make sure everybody understands the new format and has all the information they need. And I imagine that's going to play into some of the decisions that the committee ends up doing. And you know, in terms of what level of detail to get into, that's another kind of question I would have, is if the council does want to funnel everything through the finance committee, it might be difficult to avoid getting into some of the details.
Well, yeah, and of course, we've always done this on a free-floating basis. Every year, there's some different point of emphasis, and so on some things, we will really get down into the nitty-gritty. Other things, we say, looks good to us, and it may, in fact, not look good to somebody else on the council, and all council members have an equal vote in the budget, the final budget, and so we need to be mindful of that and honor that. I'm just saying it might be easier if we were doing it together, so that we all hear the same things and we all get to have an input at a time when it may make a difference. But that's for the recommendation. We've talked about this over the years, and in fact, it was pointed out to me by Daniela yesterday that we talked about it at the last Finance Committee meeting. Why haven't we done anything? And I said, I'm guilty. I should have thought about some legislation to think about changing this.
Well, quit beating yourself up. I mean, this is very different, and I'm not saying it's better or not better than what we've done before, but it's different. Right. And you've probably spent, as I have, some time you would not ordinarily have done just getting used to this, and I don't think I would be concerned about comments like that because they're not, they're not true.
Right. All right. So,
Mr. Chair, may I suggest that you send an email to all of our colleagues to ask them if there are specific things in the budget they would like for us to address?
yes. I had
And
intended
remind
to.
them that they're certainly free to show up for any of our meetings that they wish to, as Alderman Savage has taken advantage of, and Alderwoman Tierney was there.
And Alderwoman Tierney in particular, because she has some good facility with numbers, which isn't, so it would really be valuable to the extent that she can, that she come and help us walk through the number part of the budget. But the budget is a policy document, and it's a political document, and it's basically the statement from the council to the constituents, here's the money we have and here's how we plan to spend it. And it really is a document that I think is intended to show we're being responsible in using their money. And that's why we get into some of the details and why we have debates and disagreements.
Would you also include in that email that all of our meetings are recorded, and if they choose to listen to the discussion on any specific issue, they can do so? Just as a reminder, I'm sure they already know that. But
I think our chairman's trying to tell us we can't add and subtract there. Alderwoman
No.
Finlayson.
and I'm good with that.
Yeah, well, and you have acknowledged that yourself. It's weirdos like me that like to delve into spreadsheets, but
Accounting and auditing, you're right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
also, all right, so we have before us approval of the agenda for today. The agenda for today is
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
I second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Do we
them
know
anyway.
what the agenda is?
Yes.
Yes.
The agenda is to start taking up discussions with the departments, and we have before us today the Office of the Mayor, the Office of Law, Human Resources Division, and MIT.
Are we on 417?
Yeah, yes, I'm on 417.
Because all I have on mine is capital budget and CIP review.
Are you on 417?
Yeah, that's what it says, 4/17/19.
That's today's date. You have to.
Oh, okay, all right. I am on the wrong meeting. I do apologize. No, that's still the wrong meeting then.
Now, we got 4 departments to cover today.
Finance Committee special meeting, the 18th.
That's the 18th, correct.
Yeah, we're the 17th.
Okay, so, now it won't open, so. So I'll move approval of the agenda as written.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. And Alderman Tierney shows up just after we got through saying nice things about her.
Okay,
All right.
can we take them back now?
Right. All right.
She's not paying attention, so what the
Kia,
heck?
did we approve the minutes or not?
No.
We have not. All right, so the next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the meeting of the 15th.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the minutes from the April 15th meeting.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. All right. We are now ready to move into the operating budget by departmental reviews, and the first item on the agenda is City Council and Office of the Mayor. And I assume, Ms. Smith, that's why you're here. Okay. Yes, please come to the table.
Okay, let's see how well I did with my
I think
book.
there's several items that we can discuss here. First of all, again, I want to compliment the structure of the budget this year. It's very nice to have this front piece that gives a description of each of these bodies and what they do, right next to the staffing, and then getting into some of the details of the budget. And then, interestingly enough, and it's part of us, we don't have performance measures. Maybe that's a good thing that the council doesn't have performance measures, but I'm assuming for next year's budget, everybody will have sort of the same format and have these performance measures here. But is there a general statement you would like to make, Susie, or should we dig right in?
Obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Like you, I congratulate our city manager on the layout of our budget, the transparency of the information, and I believe pulling all the information one needs to make the decisions all together. And likewise, I congratulate our finance director for her leadership role there too. I believe that the organization of the mayor's office that we're proposing and the emphasis on that reorganization of strengthening policy, strengthening the ability to have legislation of the council, that whole arena. In terms of staffing on the One Annapolis staff, I believe that the time, and I gather from your previous remarks, that you're going to ask me about the changing the liaison staff to permanent employees. I think we've had those as those individuals or that position for about 3 years. Initially, the current for a year, and I believe that that's the right thing to do to make those permanent positions.
Could you stop for a second, please?
Sure.
We're on page 43 of the budget document, and I was initially shocked when I saw Hispanic liaison and African American liaison zeroed out. I thought, uh-oh. But I am having a little bit of a hard time finding where they...
If you look right below those two things, you see
Okay, so that's the A1072.
additional exempt
All right. So this is a format
And that's described on page 43.
Right.
And 44, it gives
Right.
you the description of each of the personnel changes.
Right.
So a good chunk of the way the budget document treats these personnel things is we'll see zeros, staff being zeroed out, and then right next to it, this is for promotions, right next to it, we'll see a movement. So this is a movement from contract services to permanent staff
Right.
at the A10 level. And so that's one of the changes. There's other changes that are going on in terms of down below that. For 19, where environmental policy advisor was 0, now we have 3 positions that are filled with staff, and same sort of thing where the city clerk down here with the staff are were 0s and now they're 1s and so forth, and the net change is going from 20 FTEs to 25 FTEs. So you were in the midst of explaining this to us. And then I did see in the paper a discussion from the mayor this morning, which I believe gets to the enhancements on page 45. So
Right.
that's one of the other things.
And those
that-
are an addition as well.
Right.
Would you like to, and we,
Well, are there
I'm
questions
happy,
from?
Yeah.
I think probably it would be good to answer questions beyond that.
I think you're probably right. So, questions from the committee on anything, but right now we are looking at the staffing summary.
I do.
Yes.
Am I to understand that the appointments by the mayor, the African-American liaison, the community service specialist, Hispanic liaison, the recommendation is that they become permanent employees, not appointments by the mayor?
They are appointments by the mayor in the sense that they are exempt employees. So that's exempt employees, like I am and like most of the staff members in the mayor's office.
Alderwoman
Does the-
Finlayson, to clarify, they were contract employees before.
Right, I'm sorry.
Now they're moving to exempt employees. They're still full-time, they're offered all benefits, they're just appointed positions, not civil service positions.
So they work at the pleasure of
Correct.
the current mayor?
Correct.
So any movement that we make does not make them, take them out of that work at the pleasure status?
No, they were contract workers, which makes them at the pleasure, because you can terminate their
Okay.
contract at will, and the exempt status, the mayor can appoint or unappoint them at any time.
Okay. I guess my concern is that the next mayor who comes in will want to bring his own staff. So will this allow that to continue, that process to continue?
Yes, it will.
Okay. Thank you.
Same question I had. Alderman Pale?
No questions.
All right, and then, of course, the ones below here have to do with the part of the reorganization legislation. We have deferred talking about the legislation to a future date, but certainly will entertain any discussion or observations. So I'm referring specifically to the Economic Policy Advisor, and I guess I have a question there. This is an A17. I think in the organization chart on 51, that position was an A20. Yeah, if you go
Alderman
to...
Arnett, I can walk you through those.
All right,
Did
thank
you
you.
say economic development?
No, yes, I did say it.
Economic development is currently a grade A17, it stays a grade A17.
Right.
It is an exempt position now, it remains an exempt position. Instead of serving at the pleasure of the Director of Planning and Zoning, it will serve at the pleasure of the mayor. The Small and Minority Business Enterprise Liaison in Economic Development is currently in Planning and Zoning. We are moving it to the mayor's office as well, so that all policy initiatives, including economic development, are within the mayor's office. It is a civil service grade 14 now. It remains a civil service grade 14. There is zero impact on the budget of that change.
Thank you. That was one of the questions, but I guess that would raise the same question that Alderwoman Finlayson raised. If the new mayor wants to have a different direction and a different person for the small minority, what would happen with this staff person? Because they're now
That's a
civil
service
service.
position. It remains a civil service position. It would have civil service protection.
So if the mayor wants someone else in that job, what happens by making this what is, which it is
Either
now?
that person who's in the job is given and accepts some other equivalent job, or the mayor can't do anything.
Or the mayor can't?
Can't do anything. It is a civil service position. It has civil service protection.
So that's not parallel construction with what we just discussed in terms of the liaison people. And I'm kind of interested in...
Can I take you down the chart? I think that would be most useful.
All right.
And so that you all understand the changes, who's exempt and who's civil service.
I
and the
think the
cost.
term liaison is misused here, because we've had a smaller minority business coordinator in the past. That person had at one time answered to the mayor, another time answered to the planning director. I don't think this position is intended to be similar to the other liaisons that are listed in the mayor's office.
Okay, if I could walk you down the chart, we can
Okay.
address that. So you have 8 aldermen and alderwomen, no change. Yeah, that's on. We have a mayor, no change. We have a chief of staff who is exempt, grade A16, and remains exempt, grade A16.
Mr. Chair, we need to
Oops.
change that
Communications officer,
question.
which
I'd like to get the
remains
chart
exempt,
that
grade
has
15.
how much money we're
We
talking
have an
about.
administrative assistant, grade A8. There is a priority vote that we need to correct. That should not be exempt. That is civil service. And then we'll have to
I'm sorry, there
Administrative
was
assistant.
an interruption. Could you pick up the thread again? I didn't hear the last couple of statements.
8 aldermen and alderwomen.
Right,
and one
right.
mayor, no change.
Right.
All elected.
Right.
We have 1 exempt chief of staff, no change in any way. 1 exempt communications officer, no change in any way. 1 should be civil service administrative assistant. Sorry. Civil service administrative assistant, no change in any way. It's civil service now. It remains civil service. We've got an X in the wrong column.
Okay, so there is an error here, so it should
That's an
move
error.
from
Jody will
exempt
give us
to
a
civil
corrected
service.
page.
Okay.
You have a contract
Whoa,
part-time.
slow down, please. Are we saying first of all, is that the person that sits at the,
Yes, it is.
right. So are we saying that
Bernice
that
said.
should not be exempt?
Correct. It's civil service.
Sorry, so that's an amendment we need to make, okay. All right, thank you.
We have a part-time arts and veterans liaison contractual that remains the same. Right now, we have 2 full-time contractual community liaisons, one for the Hispanic community and one for the African American community. Those both become community services specialists, which is the line right below them,
Right,
grade A10 in the exempt service, serving at the pleasure of the mayor. We have 1 contractual full-time economic policy analyst right now. That remains a full-time contractual economic policy analyst. We have 1 constituent services officer right now, exempt. That remains exactly the same. We have a community engagement administrator. That remains exactly the same. We are moving environmental policy advisor into the mayor's office. It is currently the director of the Office of Environmental Policy, grade 20. So we have reassigned the duties. We have a new job description. The position will no longer have any supervisory duties. The classification study indicated that the position should be a grade 17, and Human Resources, Tricia Hopkins, has looked at the position description to look for internal equity in the appropriate grade assignment, and it should be a grade 17, and we'd be happy to share that position description with you.
We're moving economic development, both positions, into the mayor's office. We just reviewed that. There's no cost to that change. I will add that for the environment, well, let me go down the chart and then I'll come back to environmental policy. We have one development event specialist exempt.
Can we stop for a moment? Go back to small minority business. So that remains in civil service?
Yes.
Okay.
That's Hope Stewart's position. There's zero change.
Okay.
Special events, we have the development event specialist, which is Felicia's Nolan position. It's exempt. It's grade 12. There is no change. In the charter, the city clerk is under the mayor. The city clerk is not under the Office of Law. So we have moved the 3 city clerk positions into the mayor's office. There is zero cost to this. It is putting the people where the charter says the people belong.
And they
Still civil
remain
service.
civil service.
They're all 3 civil service positions. That's correct. Zero cost, nothing changes, except they are now shown in the budget that the charter says they should be in.
All right.
I would like to see the special events coordinator move to civil service. That position has, and the person, I know we don't want to make it personal, has moved from administration to administration. And it shouldn't be a political thing.
I would agree with you, and I will ask Tricia if she will present that to the Civil Service Review Board.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And can I just get a sense of the committee on that? I also agree with that. Alderman Payon, have you thought about it?
Haven't thought a lot about it, but I disagree with it.
Okay, so we have something to talk about. So I'm confused. Oh, Alderwoman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Could you elaborate a little bit on the economic development manager? What is that now, and what is this proposed? I'm a little confused.
It is, right now, it's an economic development manager, grade A17, exempt service in planning and zoning.
Who is that now?
It's a vacant position. It was Hollis Minor's position, and
Which
Hope
was half
is acting.
It was half city, half county?
No.
I mean, that's what I need clarification on.
Totally wrong.
Okay.
100% city. There's not one dime of county money
I'm glad I asked the
in the economic
question.
development manager position.
Okay, because there's a misunderstanding there, I believe.
Well, may I?
Please.
Actually, that person sat in 2 different places.
The person a county does provide office space for our people to go 2 days a week to work in coordination with them, but their salary, their benefits, their training and education, none of it, not one dime of it's from the county.
Okay.
So it is an exempt economic development manager position in planning and zoning right now. It becomes an exempt economic development manager position in the mayor's office, same grade, no impact.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I do have some concerns. So the city clerk, I understand that the charter currently says it's underneath the mayor's office, but I'm kind of hesitant about having the city clerk's office and economic development and the environmental policy advisor, ignoring the reorganization for a moment, but those 3 within the mayor's office. I just feel like that risks over politicizing those positions and roles, but also inserts a bit of instability in those functions. And I think it, especially with some of the turmoil we've been seeing lately, I think it'd be good to have some stability in those functions. Especially city clerk, in terms of keeping that non-political. I'd much rather see that within the city manager's office, if anywhere. And keeping economic development in the planning and zoning department. So, I mean, I do have more questions about the rationale from the mayor's office in terms of why they want to see. I don't know when you want to get into that, but those are just some of my initial thoughts.
Right.
So, Alderman Savage, if you would like the Office of Law to draw up legislation that puts the city clerk under the city manager or puts the city clerk under the Office of Law, which is where it was shown last year, we can certainly ask the Office of Law to draft that legislation, but right now the charter says The city clerk is under the mayor's office, and they are civil service
understand.
positions. They're not exempt, they're not subject to the whim of the mayor.
I trust you.
I understand, that's what I said that in my comments.
So if
I
you'd
said,
like that, we'd be
I
happy-
understand that's what the charter,
If you'd
that's
like
why I'm
that-
bringing it up with the committees to see what their thoughts are on if that's something we should pursue or not in terms of
Yeah,
changing.
so I guess I would ask, not only the committee, but all alderpersons, I'm making notes, so that when we get to the final report, I believe that's the time when we need to recommend legislative changes and things like that to the council writ large. And it's helpful for both of you being here, I really do appreciate it, because then we get a better sense of where a broader mindset of the council is.
Alderman Arnett, I'm going to suggest if you think you're going to want legislation, not an amendment to an existing piece of legislation, you need to get that in the works, because if your report doesn't come out until May 13th, that legislation, if there were some, would not be introduced until after May 13th.
Okay.
And it needs to be in place and effective on July 1st.
Right, I take your point. So, but let me, Alderman Payon has been very patient, wanting to get into some questions, but I still would like to understand more about the relationship between the economic policy analysts and the economic development components. So that's something to tuck in the back of our minds. But Alderman Payon has been patiently waiting to ask some questions about this structure and reorganization. So you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. The first thing, and perhaps the maybe the only thing I would like, is a chart with the pay scales, the pay grades on them, so I know how much money we're talking about here. I mean, obviously an A16 makes more than an A08, but I mean, are we talking 50,000 versus 100,000? I have no idea.
So
without
you
something in front of
have
me.
before you Resolution 1519, which has the pay scales on it. Do you have
I
that
have
piece of
before me?
legislation?
Well,
I'm
it's
sorry.
in our, it was given,
Takia handed it out
Yeah.
at the last meeting.
it was given to us the night of the introduction of the budget, and
Okay,
Yeah, we
I
do
have
have
not, I do not have that.
Which
Well,
one are
two
you looking at?
It's Resolution 1519.
1519.
No, I have that. What, I was asking
Oh,
what,
it's not that page, it's, well, that page does show all the positions, but
yeah.
there's the normal schedule that we have to approve every year.
Yes,
is
I've
in
not seen this.
Yeah, well, Takia, you gave, yeah, so it's in that big package that Takia gave us
Actually,
at the
that's
last meeting.
14 and 15. That's what we were missing
I got
yesterday.
a
The
big
It's probably in that big fact.
And I have filed everything I got. That was
Right, so you
Okay.
should
said
have, yeah, it's there. So
Was
you should
that
have
an ordinance?
Resolution
No, it's a resolution,
1519
we
in
did
there.
we were
yesterday.
missing.
Further, deeper back
Okay.
towards the
but I copied them for everything. So,
Okay.
Okay,
where's your
got it,
legislation?
found it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Right here, this is,
So
Our
the other
Well,
thing,
I found,
I'm organized.
so that'll tell you the
Pardon?
range. So it tells you the range of pay for A10, which goes from 47,
okay. All right, goes up to 820.
well, no,
Okay.
but the A10 salary range goes from 47.7 all the way up to 80,000,
Got it.
which is.
Thank you.
There's nothing new here, and I guess while we're here, there's no changes in this from previous
Yes, there
years?
are, as explained in the staff report and fiscal note that accompanied the resolution.
Okay,
The A scale reflects a 2% COLA, which
Well,
was consistent with our union negotiations. The F scale is a 2.5% COLA. The P scale is no COLA for police. We have also adjusted the F18 and F20 scales to match the A18 and A20 scales.
Right.
You'll remember that I told you the fire chief scale is less than every other department head, and the director of the Office of Environmental Policy.
Right.
So we have adjusted F18 and F20.
All right, there, some of these other changes, I guess I don't quite understand why we're moving from contract to exempt or civil service positions. They
So-
inherently involve, in the long term, more expenses, even though exempt. I realize the difference between that and civil service, but if there's a 2 or 3% citywide raise, I presume that the exempt employees are, get that also. Contract employees do not or should not. And contract employees are not offered or should not be offered the same benefits as exempt or civil service employees. So long-term, I think at least there's a potential for considerably more expense by making these changes. I don't understand why they're being done. Several of them have at least worked just fine over the years. I'm not the one on contract. It's easy for me to say, but then I wouldn't sign a contract if I didn't want to come to work for the city in that capacity or in that status.
Alderman Payon, you may recall a number of years ago when we analyzed our employees pool and determined that we had, I think it was over 100, Alderman Arnett, you can correct me, of contract employees.
No, I remember that.
Yeah, but they were not the same as a contractor coming in to do a service. These were people who had been doing a job that's important to the city, but had never been moved to a more permanent status. And I'll let Trish talk to that. I think, though, that we're confusing the term contract.
Right. You
Well,
also,
I understand that, but I don't agree with it. I mean, I think if you're on contract, you're on contract.
okay, so I will just say that you all adopted a policy.
Yeah, we did.
The city
Yeah.
council adopted a policy that contractual employees need to be reviewed after 2 years to determine whether they should continue to be contractual or whether they should be civil service. We did exactly that.
Yeah.
And we
wasn't the
complied
whole
with your
council.
resolution. And so the approach that I took was, if this is a position that we would need, regardless of a funding source, it should be civil service. If it's a continuing, ongoing position needed for the city's operations, it should be a civil service position, or exempt, but in most cases, civil service. The exception we made to that was the police department, because the police department has a number of very long-term contractual employees, most of whom are retired, rehired police officers.
Retired annuitants.
And we wanted to leave that to the next police chief to review, and we'll deal with that in the next year's budget as far as what gets converted, what we propose to convert from contractual to civil service.
How many of these people on contract are getting benefits, health benefits,
All of them that
retirement?
work more than 30 hours a week, we are required to provide health benefits under federal law. They don't get retirement benefits, but we may have to start providing that, or else. So right now they get health insurance, they get annual leave, they get sick leave, they get holidays.
And that's if they're on contract?
Yes. And if we give a 2% COLA to the employees, they get a 2% COLA. What they don't get right now is pension. So there are benefits we are required to give them by law, like sick leave, right? We're not required to give them annual leave. So now we may have an issue with pension, where if we provide them annual leave, we will be required to put them in the pension plan. So we are rethinking that scenario and not doing annual leave, doing perhaps bumping up their pay by a commensurate amount, and when they take off, they don't get paid, so that we don't incur pension obligations.
All right, so if I go to work, you leave the city and come back after an appropriate amount of time as a half-time assistant city attorney on contract and make, $60,000, $70,000 a year.
This has a familiar ring.
And that you would have to pay me health benefits, you would have
Not
to
if you
give...
were part-time, not if you worked less than 30 hours a week.
But what if I work 30 hours a
Then
week?
yes, we would. That's federal law.
Do you have a site for that federal law, by chance?
Affordable Care Act requirements.
Okay.
So, Alderman Payon, I do recall when we discussed this way back when, and Alderwoman Finlayson and I were on a special committee or special task force assigned by then Mayor Cohen to look at this whole issue, and we in fact did come back with a recommendation to the council that we should really move people who are essentially full-time employees of the city and getting everything but pension. And some people were getting pension back then in the regular way of things being done. Thank you.
People on the city council getting health benefits.
So we couldn't move everybody all at once. So we moved a third of the people who are under contract to permanent employee status. The next year we moved another cluster. Tricia, you weren't here, but I think we pretty much cleared that all up.
I thought there was 1/3 we never got to.
It might be. Yeah.
We looked at their dates associated with when they actually went into that contractual position, because we have some people who've moved around. And I did the work to match up what is the appropriate title. A lot of cases, they're already using the title that's associated with a civil service position. And that's what this budget's going to reflect as well. With the exception, as Teresa already provided, that in the police department, it's just another situation there that it's best reviewed by an incoming police chief, and we'll work through the elements of that as well. But I think you'll be happy to know that your efforts on setting criteria for contractual employees that we did. We really this year made a very concerted effort to follow that intent.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask Takia to start developing a separate list of legislative actions. I take the city manager's point that if we really want to change things, we really need to start on that now. So Alderman Payon, is there any action that you have in mind that we should be considering as a committee in regard to these contract employees at this time?
Nothing in particular. I just don't think it's a good idea to convert them.
Well, you've been consistent in that view, because I remember that was your position back when we did it. We do have another issue, though, which was raised by Alderman Savage, which I would like the committee to discuss and then think about some legislative action, and that is this move of the city clerk and the attendant people to the office of the mayor, as opposed to changing the code to keep them elsewhere, either with the city manager or with the Office of Law. I will remind my colleagues that in the last administration, there was a great deal of angst over the city clerk position, and had the city clerk not been protected by civil service, she, I'm sure, would have been gone. And so we have real live evidence, not with this administration, but past administrations, that is something that we need to protect. So is there a sense of the council that we should ask for legislation?
Well, Mr. Chair, they're civil service now.
They are civil service now.
So that doesn't change. And the previous administration learned that
from the council.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not, but it was very clear that there was no opportunity to dismiss the city clerk or to move her to another position. So the civil service does protect them.
Well, but there's another point here. That body also runs the elections, and I think that's a whole nother reason to consider sheltering them in the Office of Law rather in the very department that is got all of the electeds in it. And therefore, I don't think there were some things that needed to be improved, but I don't think there was any hanky-panky from the city clerk's office for that particular election. But that doesn't mean that there couldn't be pressures to do things. So I kind of like Alderman Savage's idea of keeping where we always thought the city clerk's position was, rather than doing this, which is reflective, follow the code. We're the number one people should be enforcing following the code, and we haven't.
Okay, well, two things. One, city attorney answers to the mayor. So whether it's direct to the mayor or through still in the mayor's office. So that doesn't change.
Well, but attorneys have, and maybe Ashley can speak to this, because I was just talking to an attorney this morning. Attorneys have an obligation to their profession where they need to inform their client of something that's not appropriate, and if the client doesn't heed it, they need to make a decision of whether to leave or stay. So I think there's some protection in the Office of Law that has to do with the requirements of being a certified attorney.
Well, I think this bears more discussion. City Attorney Ashley is in the room and can answer, but I would also like to hear from the city clerk.
That would be a good idea. Yeah,
since we're talking about her position, she knows better than all of us in this room, what her responsibilities are and what her line of authority is.
Right.
So
did you want to ask?
Yeah, I think
Ashley some questions.
Well, yeah, Miss Ashley Leonard.
Yeah.
And I think we're kind of belaboring something that we don't need to, but.
Do you want to ask Regina to come up?
Yes, she's texting.
Thank you.
Can you weigh in on this, the value of them staying in the law department or in the mayor's office, where there's no room, by the way?
I don't want to speak out of turn for the city clerk, but I'm not sure she's ever really thought of herself as being under the city attorney, because she, better than most, knows what the city charter says. And I'm not sure how much protection being under the city attorney would offer. I mean, yes, attorneys do have an obligation to provide advice, but our limits as to what we can actually make our clients, in this case the mayor, do are limited. We can't force his hand, and unless it's something really egregious that we would need to report, I'm not sure we would offer that much of more of a safety net for the city clerk. But like I said, I mean, the charter's always been written that the city clerk position reports to the mayor, and I believe that she's sort of always operated under that philosophy. Not that she hasn't worked very cohesively with the city attorneys, but I mean, I think she's always sort of operated it as it's being proposed.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll wait to hear if Regina can come up, but Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, with a lot, not just the city clerk, but some of the others too, again, with economic and environmental, it's thinking about future administrations and trying to avoid conflicts and problems down the road. And that's where, I could see having it housed in either the city law office like it is now formally, and if we need to change the charter, or perhaps city manager's office. But I do want to kind of take an opportunity to just speak to a larger issue, which the city manager made clear in terms of we need to get legislation out quickly. The whole process just seems to be not the most efficient, in the sense that we didn't know what was in the budget until, what was it, April 8th?
Right.
There was some one-on-one discussion about reorganization, but there was no collective discussion about where does the council want to go, what do we think? And now we're thrown in the budget on the 8th with 4 weeks before the committee has to come up with their decisions. I mean, we can't get stuff drafted in that short amount of time. I feel like we need to really, in the future, I know this is a tangent, but in the future, I feel like we need to figure out a way to get this stuff to the council earlier and to start a conversation earlier.
So if I could respond, every single council member knew in advance that the mayor was going to propose to move economic development and environmental policy into the mayor's office, consistent with my recommendation to him. So are you saying there are aldermen who didn't know that's what we were going to propose?
That's not the way it was told. The way it was told to me is, here's what we're considering. We want to get your feedback. I gave feedback and never heard anything back from you or the administration about it. That's not...
Alderman Savage, you knew what we were going to propose because you put in an alternative bill.
For the environment, I didn't know any of this other stuff about the economic development.
Well, that was discussed.
I heard murmurs even in terms of the Office of Emergency Management, but I didn't know. Again, it was sold to me as, we want to have a discussion. We haven't made up our mind, and you even told me that on the environmental, and then we did this on the 8th about...
I discussed the emergency management reorganization, I discussed the economic development reorganization, and I discussed the environmental policy reorganization with every alderperson. I got no feedback on emergency management, except questions about whether our current director of emergency management might take that position. I got no feedback on economic development, except that some, as you have suggested, think that it should remain in planning and zoning. And those who gave me that feedback, I explained to them, and I'd be happy to explain this morning, the whole reason that we are proposing to move policy into the mayor's office, and that if you had, for example, as we do have, vacancies on Main Street, say the local economy in Annapolis had totally tanked, and a mayor runs for mayor and wins on the premise of, I'm going to turn around our local economy. And then that person wouldn't be the person who brings in someone that they want to develop their economic policy and carry it out. I am not aware of any, and I'm not as familiar with municipalities, but every county I know of, economic development is a cabinet position reporting directly to a county executive, serving at the pleasure of the county executive. And so we are proposing the same thing for both economic development and environmental policy. So for both of those, I believe in order to have an effective city government, we need to have a good government structure within the administration. We need to have good public policy that is binding and enacted by ordinance, not by resolution and not by policy. And we need to have competent department heads to carry out that public policy enacted by ordinance. That is what we are attempting to do in this budget. Economic development does do policy, but there are no code provisions, right, that economic development administers. They don't have Title 14 or something like that they administer. So this brings policy into the mayor's office. It puts operations under the city manager, which is what the charter says. And so the economic development manager will help the mayor develop appropriate economic development policy consistent with the mayor's goals and objectives, and the small and minority business liaison will help carry that out. And on environmental policy, we are also looking to bring that position into the mayor's office to help us develop what public policy we should enact by ordinance that's binding, that would be backed by environmental science and best practices. And then once we adopt our public policy by ordinance, which is what I believe good governance requires, our department heads in charge of those titles of the code would be the ones who carry that out. So that's what we are proposing, and that is why we are proposing it.
So I will note in passing an exception. I definitely did give you feedback on all of these and have continued to, and I think others have as well. But I want to get into this whole economic stuff. But right now, the question in front of the committee is there, well, right now we have before us the question of whether we should ask for any legislation regarding the city clerk's office. The city manager is absolutely correct, and I think the testimony we've heard from Ashley that it is under the office of the mayor, has always been under the office of the mayor, and it's been housed with law. But if we want to make it something different than what this chart shows, which is a correction, a number of corrections, because we've been funding the Office of Law, even though the Office of Law itself hasn't existed in code. So what the city manager is doing is making us code compliant. I don't think we can argue that we shouldn't be code compliant. If we want to change the code, I think we need to get a sense of that and get that to the Office of Law. So Alderwoman Tierney, and then I do need to hear from the committee itself where we are.
Yeah, just very quickly, as you were discussing, I put in a request for that legislation so that it can be concurrent with our review of the budget.
Right.
We can't afford to have a linear process where we have to wait till your recommendations. I thought it would be in the best interest that if we have a proposed amendment to keep it in the Office of Law, then we can all discuss it as a collective body.
No, I agree with you, but first we have to get a sense of the committee. So we'll get to the economics part of it, but right now, the city clerk is here. The discussion was about this proposal in the mayor's budget, which in fact shows the city clerk's office where code shows it. And we've been having some discussion about, is there a better place for it to be? So I was particularly voicing my concern about the ruckus that occurred at the beginning of the last administration. And I think I'm sensing from my colleagues our desire to shelter the city clerk's office as much as possible from any possible political pressures. And so I know we're putting you in an awkward situation, Regina, and I don't want to do that, but to the extent that you'd like to give us your sense of how things have been operating and your sense of actually codifying in the budget what has been in the code all along.
May I clarify?
Rephrase that? You want to rephrase?
Yeah, but I can shorter
Let me put it in layman's terms for you.
My second choice for being an economist was to be a lawyer.
Yeah, okay.
Even lawyers don't get paid by the word.
You know, the question is whether you're most effective where you are as part of the law department, or whether you'd be more effective in the mayor's office.
Well, clerks are effective no matter where you put them.
Good political answer. Good political answer.
We're worker bees. Okay, but in my opinion, the mayor's office is very political, and we try to stay neutral to all of the political and out of the stuff that we don't really need to know. We don't want to be involved in that. So I think in the clerk's office should be associated with the Office of Law. But there are also some issues with that too, because they have stuff that's confidential and our office is totally public. We can give you anything we have. Their stuff we can't. So putting us there, I think, would be a better fit than putting us upstairs with Susie, even though we love her. But I think it works better there.
So are we talking line of authority, or are we talking about work location?
Office of Law.
Well, I'm talking about line of authority when you.
So the Office of Law reports to the mayor. So you would still be reporting to the mayor. Another option we've discussed is putting the city clerk under the city manager. So I don't have a full sense of where everyone, including our colleagues who are helping us with this, Alderman Savage, Alderwoman Tierney, I don't have a
I don't think she's finished, however.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, civil servants are under directors, and all civil servants are, except for the ones in the city clerk's office, are under the city manager. So wherever you decide we should go, we're going to do a good job. I don't have a problem being under the city manager. I just think the mayor's office is a political one. So under the Office of Law, under the city manager doesn't.
So does this move you to the city manager's office?
No.
No, it's under the mayor.
It's under the mayor.
That's what the charter requires
Yes.
right now. If you
That's
want
what the
something
charter says.
different, you need to amend the charter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
But one
So-
thing I would like to request while I'm here, the charter states that the city clerk is appointed, but my position is civil service. That wasn't corrected when they changed the job description to civil service for myself and Cindy. So if
Yeah,
you
you're
fix
raising-
it, fix it all.
Yeah, you're raising another issue.
May I clarify one point?
Please.
All civil service employees are still appointed to their positions.
Right.
It's the civil service protection that makes it makes the difference between an exempt and a civil service position. Well,
Everybody has an appointing authority.
Yeah.
You are appointed as exempt, you are appointed as civil service, you are appointed as contractual. Everyone has an appointing authority.
and that appointing authority is the department head. So the appointing authority for the city clerk would be the department head of whatever department you ultimately place the city clerk's office under.
Right. So in this case, it would be the mayor.
And I'd like to make another point, because I hear some of the concerns about the city attorney reporting to the mayor. If the city clerk's responsibilities and expectations are laid out in the code, that gives you the authority under the law to exercise them in that manner, which even the city attorney's not going to be able to, should not be able to prevent happening, even
Right.
though that line authority is coming from the mayor.
Okay. Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, so just thinking about this, and if you turn to page 41, the organizational chart, because just going through the scenario, even if we put the city clerk's office underneath the city manager, you can see by this org chart, everybody's, including the city manager, all still report to the mayor. I mean, granted, I do think there should be a dashed line between the aldermen and the alderwomen and the city manager, but the way this is set up is, I think, there's still a risk of that office being politicized as well. So, when I think about it, it seems like the city clerk's office, perhaps it does make sense where it is with the city attorney. I mean, when I think of the city clerk, I do think more of legislative process and support to the council and the mayor, where, the city manager's office is more oriented on implementing policy. So, and if we do decide to keep it in this law office, I'm not entirely convinced we need to change the code. I mean, I think this law office is still underneath the mayor. I don't think that would necessarily conflict with the charter, which says that it has to be located in the mayor. It doesn't say it has to report directly to the mayor. I'll verify that, but.
Well, I take 2 points from your comments. One, I think at a minimum, this is a question, and I think that we need to have a vote of the committee on whether we want to consider drafting some legislation that changes the code. But I thank you for reminding us of the flow chart here, of the organizational chart on page 41, because I think there should also be a line from the council to the city manager, and we should even consider a line going from the council to the city attorney, since that is the source of all of the legislation, which is our number one priority, is that we write legislation. Number two is oversight. Number three is the budget. But really, the city manager in the code, as we revised it to go to the current form of government we have, does report to the council as well as the mayor.
Alderman Arnett, I don't think that's an accurate statement.
Well,
I am confirmed by the city council. I can be fired by the city council, but the charter very clearly says that the mayor is my direct supervisor.
right.
And the
that
code
for
very clearly
supervision-
says that the city council can't direct me or any employee.
Well,
Well-
it doesn't say that about the city manager. It says it about any other
Okay,
employee. but not
I would
city
disagree with that. We can certainly ask the Office of Law if you want.
Right.
And same
I do
thing
think
with
we
the
need to-
Office of Law and the city clerk, where Alderman Savage is suggesting it can just be under the Office of Law with no change in the charter. It's all a matter of who is the appointing authority. So who is the appointing authority that does the city attorney's evaluation, that does my evaluation? Who is the appointing authority who does Ashley Leonard's evaluation? right? That's why it needs to be set up properly, and, or would do Regina's evaluation, right? You need to have that in the code, who the appointing authority is, because that drives all of the personnel matters below it.
So do those evaluations get done? Who's doing them now?
I haven't been here a year yet. I got 2 more days.
Okay, that's your excuse. What about everybody else's? What about the law department? Who evaluates the law department? Does the mayor?
Whoever is the city attorney.
Does the city attorney, and then the city attorney generally does the assistant city attorney.
Right.
I'm not sure about the city.
Right, but that is not in the code because there's no office of law in the code. So the legislation we've proposed establishes an office of law and gives the city attorney the appointing authority over the assistant city attorneys and Karen Steele's position and Jacqueline Lee's position, et
Okay.
cetera.
So once we create the office of law, then that line of authority will be in place.
Correct.
But right now, Ms. Eldridge, who does your evaluation? No one. So nobody's doing them now, anywhere? Okay.
Because they're required annually, right? At a minimum? So that's a whole nother
Yeah.
kettle of fish, but we're going to get into,
It's not
right?
required, it's a good practice.
Pardon me?
It's not required, it is a good practice.
Isn't it required for promotion?
It's required to support a step increase, but if you're maxed out,
Right.
there is no requirement. But it is still a good practice, obviously.
Alderman Payon, and then I do want to
Thank you. Other than the fact that we're being told that your position presently, the way it's set up presently, may be downright illegal, do you have any problem with the way things are right now? Okay, didn't think so.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Tricia, I think I heard, and I remember that Classy Hoyle and I were working with Paul Renstead back in 2009, redoing the regs and the personnel rules and regulations.
Right, we attempted to bring it before you in 2015.
Right.
And went back to the drawing board.
And I have a whole knapsack full of all of those. Our 1509 was very big, and then we had a lot of versions of it, and we never got it done, and Asani died. But I think that getting back to that and bringing it up to date and making it much clearer is long overdue.
I
And
agree
think-
with you, and
Right.
we are grateful that last year we had a position added back into our
Right.
budget because we
Right.
we
and
were
we've got-
struggling to meet those objectives.
We've got proposals to elevate
Yeah,
the
we do.
level,
We
and
do.
I'm good with that. But I do think, and I think that's where, because we got really hoisted on our petard when Mayor Cohen wanted to let people go, and they couldn't be let go because they didn't have a current performance appraisal. And so I think we need to put into the rules and regulations some directives that these things have to happen at least annually. My preference would be more frequently, but at least annually for everyone, regardless of whether they're going for a step increase or a promotion or whatever. So, but that's future work to get to. Right now, we have now 2 things swirling up, but yes.
Well, this is maybe a third one, but I hope it's a minor. But before I speak to it, we've had 2 mayors who have removed people illegally, and we've had to pay.
Right.
So just keep that out there. I'm looking at the org chart, and city council associate, I don't know, is not
That's
in
under the
here.
city
and
clerk.
Well, it's under the city clerk, but I would think that that would be a separate line item going to the city council.
Well, I think that, yeah, so I think we've got a couple of things going on here right now. One is, do we want this committee to vote to ask the Office of Law to draft legislation putting the city clerk and deputy city clerk and city associate someplace other than where it resides now in the code, which is as reports to the mayor. And the choices seem to be as reports to the city manager or as reports in the Office of Law. I don't have a strong sense of where people are leaning, but this, by the way, folks, to me, is exactly what the council should be talking about. Not about T accounts, not about $5,000 here or $80,000. This is our bailiwick. This is our responsibility. So, do I have a sense of the committee about a request for some legislation?
I don't think, no. No, you're not going to get a sense from this committee member. Only because I don't think I know enough yet to decide what's the best place.
All right.
And for us to request legislation now, I think is a bit premature.
Okay, well, that's a fair statement, and I honor it, but the city manager has made an important observation, which is if we do want some legislation, we need to get a request in now, not later. So I will.
Well, let me
I would ask you what more information you need, but.
And Alderman Tierney put in a request already. So further.
And what was the nature of your request?
As you were discussing, and I heard our city manager say that it couldn't wait till your.
Right.
So I just sent a request to the Office of Law. Objective is to transfer city clerk to Office of Law, which codifies our current organization. Rationale is the best function of city government, and the product is a resolution stating above. Can we request a draft of this as soon as possible for future discussion?
So you made two good points, one of which was brought up before you got here. I subscribe to your legislation. I'll be a co-sponsor. The other is, I really think for the future, we have to operate as a committee of the whole. That's why I'm so happy you're here. We can take care of a lot of stuff pretty efficiently the way we're doing it, and the city manager has made this point to us about the committees as opposed to operating as a committee of the whole. I subscribe to some of it, particularly with regard to striking the budget, not all of it. But this is really an example of how we can cut through and get some things done. Just because the legislation is drafted as proposed legislation, still has to go through the normal legislative process, still has to get sponsors, still has to have public hearing, and still has to be voted in on first reader, second reader, and as this is a charter amendment, third reader, and because it's a charter amendment, it won't take effect for 52 days after passage anyway, or whatever the number of days is. Is it 52?
Which is why I'm not clear
50?
about
45.
45, whatever.
45 days.
Some number of days. But Alderman, just a second, Alderman Simon. You said, and that's fair, that you need more information. Are you proposing that that's something we get now, or is that something we defer to our next committee meeting when you've had a chance to? I would like to move on this.
Well, obviously, it's being moved on. But I would like to see how others do it. We know what has been, we know what is being proposed. I don't know the benefits of one over the other. I hear personal opinions about that, but I don't know the benefits. And so I'm not going to just propose to change something for the sake of changing it.
No, I don't think that's what's being proposed, but
that's what it
again,
feels
I
like.
honor your desire for more information.
Okay.
Alderman Payon, where are you?
I'm right here.
I hadn't noticed.
Yeah, I know you haven't noticed, but that's okay.
You got to poke me.
Look, I have no problem with asking for legislation, but like my colleague from Ward 4, I'm not totally sure what that legislation should be. I think I have not.
Bless you.
I have not read what you're proposing at this point. I don't know if there was anything to be read, but yeah, I think it's something in the right direction. That's about it.
All right,
I mean, I certainly don't oppose referring this to the Office of Law as quickly as we can, and, you know, one or two of us can go down there and talk things over to see where, you know, what we need and what we can do and that sort of thing. I don't think we ought to sit back and do nothing.
Right, okay. So is that a motion?
That we refer this to the Office of Law for legislation?
Right.
I don't
We
know.
have to be more specific than
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know that we need a motion for that, and my problem is I don't know exactly what we ought to have at this point.
Well, the proposal that's been discussed by two of our colleagues is
Yes.
not making this change, but making the code read that the city clerk is part of the Office of Law.
Well, I think that that's the way to go. I agree with the city manager that, you know, if the code needs to be changed, let's do that. It's much more permanent and much cleaner way of doing things.
Well, it's the right way to do it, period.
Well,
Okay.
the introduction of the resolution doesn't change the code. It brings it to the council for more discussion. I just think that discussion needs to be to happen next.
Well, if it doesn't change the code, what would we?
Well, it will.
Yeah.
It's not a done deal.
Well, okay, I understand that, but it will change the code. Yeah, okay.
So,
Draft is needed to discuss.
okay. Is the Finance Committee prepared to do anything with regard to this part of the staffing summary in the budget?
Well, I don't know that we have time to do it before May 13th. I mean, that is several weeks away, but we've got
Time to do what?
to do the legislation. I mean, what do you mean?
Well, that's the city manager's point. If we're going to do legislation,
It
we
needs to
need
be.
to do it now, not wait until May 13th or June, June 8th, because this is part of the budget.
Well, if it's cost neutral, what difference does it make?
I asked you first.
It makes a difference in the budget ordinance and where the funds are legally appropriated.
Right.
But there's nothing that says at any point during the year that we can't change something in a particular ordinance. Certainly the budget ordinance is no different from anything else.
So you could reorganize after July 1st and put it under the Office of Law and approve a budget amendment to have the appropriations do that? If you vote on the bills.
But wait a minute, I thought that this was budget neutral. What do we
It
need?
is budget neutral, but your budget appropriation ordinance is by department. So if
Yeah,
you're going
okay.
to appropriate it in one department instead of another, it requires an
Yeah,
amendment.
okay, I get it.
And
It's just that we've got one person on the finance committee that's going to be gone for a week. We've got another person that's going to be gone for more than a week. I don't know when we're going to get it done before
well,
May 13th.
if we, so let me, I got to make
I may
2
not
points.
even be at the meeting
If
to
we're
vote
going
on
to do
it.
something as the Finance Committee, we need to do it today. I think there'll still be time to gather more information,
Well, how
look
would
at
you-
how other people
How would
do
you
it.
word the motion? I mean,
The
I'll
motion
make
would
it,
be
you
that
can
we
as
ask
chair,
the Office
but
of Law to draw legislation, putting the city clerk's office under the Office of Law.
okay, I make that motion.
I second it.
You can't, you're chairman.
I can second.
Well, all right, I guess you can.
Especially when there's only 2 of us, I'm going to have to be doing something.
Well, that's true. I've never quite figured that one out, actually.
Comfortable with
I'm
at least
wi-
getting it drafted?
Yeah, we can, and then we can debate it further, and we'll have more time to research it.
So we have a motion, it's seconded. Is there further discussion? All in favor of the Finance Committee requesting this change in the charter to move the city clerk from the office of the mayor to the Office of Law, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that would be further supplemented by Alderwoman Tierney's request. I want to make a point that the city manager made that I don't think we should lose sight of, and that is that we are doing something different this year, which I think happens to be the legal way to do it, which is to pass the appropriations by ordinance, not just approving a pro forma that happens to have all those changes. And I think that is personally
way to
the
do it.
right way to do it.
Yep.
I think it's very clear, it's very explicit, it's highly documented. So we can't just sort of be cavalier. The ordinance would have to be amended for this if this legislation is drafted, and hopefully that can be done in time. It may not be, as you say, Alderman Payon, and if it isn't, it isn't, you know.
Okay.
Somebody sue us. All right, so I would like to return to other parts of this staffing summary, namely the relationship between the economic policy analyst and the economic development manager and small business enterprise liaison, small and minority business enterprise liaison. And the city manager said earlier that when mayors are elected and they want to address vacancies on Main Street or something like that, and they get elected and they want to address that, they need the ability to, thank you, Regina, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. And I agree. And in fact, that's what I thought the economic policy analyst was for. And so I guess my question on this organization is, if you have that person doing that, what is it that we're gaining in terms of bringing the economic development also into the office of mayor? And when we get into that discussion, I want to talk about the pluses and the minuses of making that move. So, did you have help for us, Susie?
If I understand your question, I'll try.
Apparently I asked
Do you want me to translate that for you?
Yeah.
No comment. I'm not even going to go there.
I'm going for the Bruce Miller Award.
Right. I didn't mean to be cute about that, but I'm sure. I think from the standpoint of the reorganization of the existing positions, that one vacant and one civil service, I think what the advantage will be, at least particularly speaking for the mayor, is a hustle for business into the city. We have, it's not a position that is necessarily just going to meetings. It's a position that we hope will be an outreach to business and possible business people, working with the county because they've got a good structure on that. It is a little more proactive, for lack of a better description, than in the past. As you know, this mayor is a business person in this city, and he has a strong sense that there is more that we can do to attract business, to support business, to work with the business partnerships and other organizations. The person who is currently on our staff, who has the title, I always forget it, I'm sorry, but it's the business, will in fact continue to follow and keep track of initiatives and the particular projects that relate to the business for the mayor. It's kind of I think it's enhancing, by putting that together, it's enhancing our strength in reaching out to business to hopefully add business, add employment into all parts of the city.
So, Alderman Payon.
He said to poke you.
I agree. I'm sorry. My focus is...
Well, that brings me to my question is, what exactly does the economic policy analyst do? I had understood he was an advisor for small businesses, but you're bringing up things that, I mean, I've never seen any analysis. I've never,
Right.
I don't know. What and why is he here as opposed to in the Economic Development Office because they
Because
seem
he-
to go hand in hand.
Right. He is a direct advisor to the mayor. He literally monitors, moves along, makes contacts, does some analysis, of what steps are necessary for a particular proposal. It is very much a follow-on to the initiatives of the mayor. I would say, and that is different than an aggressive outreach for the whole city, which is what excuse me, I'm hoping that when we fill the position for, I keep getting them mixed up, Economic Development Manager, that position will be.
Well,
They aren't competing.
if
They
you're
are-
talking about a business or economic analyst, that seems to me that that's a little different from a business advisor or a business promoter.
Yes, I think it is.
I don't get it. I mean, I don't see any of the results of what this position is supposed to be doing. I don't question anybody's competence. I mean, what are the qualifications for this job? I just
Which
want to know.
sir?
We're going back to basics here when we find out the law department isn't even operating under any code authorization. And I mean, what the heck does the business economic analyst, I mean, that to me implies somebody with an MBA, a PhD, who's going through objectively, looking at a bunch of statistics and analyzing them and providing answers.
You mean
an advisor
economist?
doesn't, to me, doesn't really involve all of that.
I can understand why one would think an analyst would be a statistical person. In our case, the analytics go to where there are business opportunities and the initiatives of the mayor.
So if I can interject, we were given all of these position descriptions, and the council approved
Right.
this position of economic policy analyst. I think it's probably not the most accurate name for the job, and
Might
maybe
be.
we can tweak that some. But I understand that, and I support that. And we supported that the mayor has the right to have the kinds of staff and people that the mayor feels he needs to within a limit. And so this is what the mayor got elected on. This is what he wants to emphasize. I get all of that. But economic development is a different kettle, and it seems to me that we're changing the role of these two positions from what they have been to now basically lobbyists and cheerleaders and so forth for filling businesses, a chamber of commerce kind of function. Economic development is part of land use, and it is part of the kinds of analysis that go on in planning and zoning, and we will need that kind of analysis. It's going to be critically important for the Forest Drive sector study and those sorts of things. So I will resist bringing these people in to the office of the mayor to become cheerleaders for business. I don't think that's their job. And if that's what they're going to do, I would argue that's too many people. But I would argue also that we need to backfill in the office, the Department of Planning and Zoning, for the kinds of analysis that go into land use. And so I really have a problem with this. My problems are twofold. I think that this politicizes these positions, which are basically analytic positions, and I think that it isolates it. Now, I can go to the planning and zoning director and talk to him and his staff about economic development and aspects of the Forest Drive in, I would assume, to be a neutral way, a forthright, this is the pluses, this is a minus. If you move it to the mayor's office, these people now have to carry the mayor's position, which may be different than other positions, and it may be different than what land use analysis would say. And so I would strongly resist making this move to bring it into the mayor's office. I think it changes the nature of the jobs, just as you have described. And I think that it leaves a vacuum in planning and zoning for these kinds of analyses for land use. So I think that that's a mistake, and I won't support it. I would certainly entertain input from my colleagues, both on the committee and elsewhere.
Can I respond to that?
Because I think, of course, that's why we're having you here. We want to hear from you.
I believe that what our existing experience was over this last year was not that we had an economic, I mean, we had, obviously, the economic development manager was in the planning and zoning, but we did not take any opportunities to do for the whole city outreach. And, this isn't cheerleading. This is trying to bring businesses, trying to add jobs to this city. And if we don't have some kind of urgency about that, I think we all express concern about that, that we need some urgency applied to that. And
I hear what you're saying, and what it feels to me that you're saying, and I'm testing this with you, is we don't have enough people to do that kind of work. And I will be glad to entertain arguments to that effect. But that's not what these people are doing in planning and zoning. And that's why I really resist taking that resource away from the planning aspect of the city and changing them over to be more outreach, more knocking on doors, more what can we do for you, maybe cheerleading as some of a pejorative. I meant it in a positive sense. We do need people. And in fact, I think the city has long suffered because we haven't been strong proponents of business as we should be, because they're a vital part of our existence and a major part of our core in the city and core and elsewhere. So I have no problem with that. But I do have a problem losing the economic development analyses. That's why I also supported strongly having this partnership with the county economic development. And that is where they help us understand the things that we need to do in terms of understanding changes in land use and those sorts of things, which is actually much more what the name economic policy analyst implies, which I think Alderman Payon is going to make a motion that we need to change that title. But these are people who are doing analyses. These are people who are looking at numbers. I've spoken with Hope, and I've looked at, we've talked about things, demographic things, economic forces, academic things like the Esri forecast that says that the population of the city is projected to go down over the next coming years, and certainly change composition. That's analytic stuff. That's not reaching out to businesses that are existing or we want to come in.
I share your belief in what Hope does. There's no question about it. I've had conversations with her also.
Right.
Her job description doesn't change.
Well,
I mean,
but it leaves an absence.
And she's not a political appointee.
No, I understand that, although, again, bringing it into the mayor's office, right. I think if the mayor has a policy, I would assume that the job of the people in the mayor's office is to espouse that policy and carry his message forth. And that's as it should be. But then there's an analytic component to things that needs to continue on, irrespective of the mayor's policy or my policy or the Chamber of Commerce's policy, which is evaluating fundamentals of what are going on, what parts are missing, what are the trends, all of those things. And that, I don't think, given your description of more outreach, is what these people will be doing. And I think that we need to, if the mayor wants more people to do the whatever we're really going to rename economic policy analysis, that's a perfectly legitimate question. But bringing these people out of an analytic component and putting them in and changing their jobs to business liaison, I can't agree to that, and I'm maybe only one of 9, but let me hear from first members of the committee.
Alderman Arnett, I would add, neither of these job descriptions or their duties change.
I understand that.
Okay.
But in truth, they will change. They are now the emissaries of the mayor and his policies.
I would argue that the economic development manager should always be an embassy of
Well, all of us,
an ambassador of
all
the mayor.
of the city employees, yes.
Exactly.
Because the mayor is the mayor. Committee members, comments?
You know, we have gone round and round with this.
We have.
We haven't decided who we are, what we are, and how we're going to do anything. The small and minority business person was in the Economic Development Office when we came on the council.
Headed by Mike Myron.
Headed by Mike Myron, who is excellent. And that department did phenomenal stuff, trained us
Helped
on
people with their
land
permits.
use and that kind of stuff. And then under Josh, he decided that small and minority businesses was going to be his focus. And so that person was brought into the mayor's office. Okay? Then another mayor comes in and it goes to the planning department.
Well, there was a big, remember the Economic Development Corporation?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
So
I
we
forgot
decided
the
to
corporation.
take
That
it
was in the meantime.
Independent, and it was quasi-governmental, and it was a
Absolutely.
corporation. It had a huge
Absolutely.
board, and it had staff.
And they started off gung-ho and did phenomenal things.
Well,
And
they did Chamber of Commerce and commercial real estate type things. They really did go out to all the businesses, and they touted vacancies and.
And
when
they
you come
brought in businesses to
Instead
the
of
city.
doing the metrics and the things that we had asked them to do
Well,
in their
They did
corporate
some,
charter.
maybe not to everyone's satisfaction, but they did some of what we have asked them to do. But over a number of years, they even petered out. So we have what we have. So we need to make a decision. And is it personality driven? We need somebody to promote small and minority businesses in the city. You know, I would think that because the mayor is a businessman, that would be a good fit for him.
Well,
that
he
he
started
would-
one in Annapolis.
Well, he's, okay. I'm putting you on a time clock, I'm just saying.
I'm telling you, he gets paid by the word.
Then he's a rich man. Anyway, so we need to decide, and I'm not wedded either way, but I would think that because the mayor's a business person, and he, you know, small and minority businesses particularly need attention that it isn't getting in the planning department. You know, nothing has been promoted over there that I could see. Now, I know they have the monthly meetings with the African-American businesses and the Hispanic businesses. I know they do that. I don't know what comes out of those meetings, and I'm not suggesting that it's anything that isn't great, but I don't know. But it needs attention, and it needs somebody to focus on it. I couldn't agree more about the policy analyst. I don't know what that means. Because, you know, and here we're dealing with personalities, which we don't want to do, but we're not seeing the analysis that this position would suggest we should be seeing.
I don't think we ever have. I mean, it's not really personal to the person occupying the office now. I don't ever remember getting the information.
So maybe that needs to be fixed in order for us to feel comfortable with these recommended changes. That whether it's through the job description or through a commitment that, you know, these are the types of things that will come out of this position in the course of the next year. So that's my 2 cents worth.
We have colleagues here. Alderwoman Tierney.
Oh, thank you for your indulgence. I agree with what you said, and I'm a problem solver, and I believe that one of the failures of the passage of the Forest Drive sector study was not being able to answer how this is all sort of a circular thing. We get businesses drawn, residents, and the question was not answered on how do we get these businesses on Forest Drive. There's absolutely no one no one that could answer that question.
Right.
And so my concern is, how does this address that gap? And I would be willing to wait. I have a lot of faith, I do, in the urban, in the ULI TAP approach for downtown, in that they have a group of team leaders, and they're focusing on retail and getting retail here, and they're sort of a three-legged stool approach. Let's get an idea to get them here. What are the finance mechanisms to get them here? Who will that be? And what do we need? I'd be willing to wait for that response. I know that's this fall. But I don't think, I just think that we've got to get it right this time. And we really have to think it through, because we have two positions here, and we don't want it to be a lost opportunity until we really define how it's going to fix the gap that we have right now, because we still have vacancies downtown, and we don't have any idea of how we're going to fill them.
All right. Thank you, Anna. Thank you. Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do subscribe to many of your comments. I hadn't even thought about a number of them, but I guess, so since the sector study was brought up, I think that does, another example is in terms of how that can impact small and minority businesses is, I haven't gotten a good answer in terms of, well, yes, we want to bring in more essentially mixed use into the corridor, but there are currently a lot of especially Hispanic businesses in the corridor. Will they be able to afford even moving their businesses into the new development? And I think that kind of speaks to, I think what you were saying in terms of, I think the value of having that office in planning and zoning is that it connects them more directly with the policy that we as a council create. It's not simply about the mayor, although I think the mayor's office, I think, should have involvement. And I can see the value for the economic policy analyst position as well. But I also do think there's a larger issue of, I feel like the mayor's office, and it's related to the environmental in terms of putting an environmental policy advisor in that office as well. I feel like there's this overall thought that the mayor's office can't be getting involved with the directors and the department actions, when I think there should be, and there is a direct connection between the mayor's office and department directors. There's nothing prohibiting him from talking with and working with the directors. I don't see why he needs specific policy advisors for each area of policy in that office, because I think there are some other larger issues about how the stability, which, thank you to my colleagues, 4 iterations of various economic organizations. I think it's up to the council to try to have, again, create structure that has the kind of stability going forward beyond administrations. Again, it's not to comment at all on what that position does, the policy analyst, but I think we need to open up our minds to some different approaches.
So I've actually heard from my 2 colleagues on the Finance Committee 2 important notions that I think we need to discuss. One, Alderman Payon, you made mention of the fact that we haven't seen any analysis from the economic policy analysts. I'm not sure that's exactly how the position description was drafted, but each one of us represent wards with business enterprises in those wards. And I think it certainly would be worth noting at a minimum what kind of activities are going on from the mayor's office in our wards to help business. And so I think that's an important thought to interject here. Alderwoman Finlayson, you reminded me, and I agree with you, and I think you're starting to come up with a notion of some kind of a compromise. Small and minority business was always in the mayor's office, and it was always an emphasis. Every mayor, certainly Mayor Cohen, certainly Mayor Moyer, and I definitely think this mayor has said this is something that has been left unattended, and it has disappeared, being in planning and zoning. Now, that doesn't mean that there's nothing being done, but we certainly aren't made aware of it. And I think that there is much more of a policy advocacy notion there where we're saying this is something where we need to spend special attention, special emphasis. And this will go contrary to reducing budget costs, but I would like to entertain the notion that when we get to planning and zoning, we keep these functions there. We fill the position that's vacant, and that we do give strong thought to bringing, along with the economic policy analyst, which I think we need to work on, that there is another analyst who is going to be working with our liaisons to work on small and minority business. And now you do start to get a critical mass where you have these emphasis both from the liaisons and now this person focusing on small and minority business, and they can work together in partnership. The liaison to those other communities is much bigger than business, but business is an important part of that. So maybe I don't know whether you intended to suggest a compromise, but it feels like a good idea to me.
Well, I'm always looking for a compromise, but I'm not sure our community liaisons have the business intent.
I think you're right.
If that becomes part of their mission, that's a whole nother issue. But I don't see them as promoting businesses in the city. And I can tell you, and Alderwoman Tierney mentioned the sector study, businesses in the Forest Drive corridor are not, they are unhappy that the sector study has been dismissed. They thought it was an opportunity to bring attention to the corridor, to businesses. And that's not what's happening. And they feel left out and unattended to. It's like nobody cares about the businesses on Forest Drive. They just care about speeding by, okay? They don't care about our community, is what they're saying, and I couldn't agree with them more. So anything that we can do to bring support for businesses, regardless of where they are, needs to be highlighted.
But I took your point to be, we also need to highlight the plight or the help for small and minority businesses.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
As a policy initiative out of the mayor's office.
Well,
we can support it with analysis from planning and zoning, but
yes,
it really, and it always did have.
Well, it kind of moved a little
well,
bit,
it
but
changes.
Yeah.
We had, I'm blanking on her name now, that sat here next to Teresa's office.
It's Ruby.
Camila?
Ruby sat there for a little
Well,
while.
Ruby did.
No, Ruby was doing Ellen.
Yeah.
Administration.
First of all,
yeah,
you know, I supported you that we postpone the resolution for the Forest Drive and keep it alive. I support bringing it back. I do support having further dialogue, which is already planned, with the Planning Commission. I don't think my sense is none of my colleagues on the council, including you and me, have dismissed the sector study. I think we've actually taken it more seriously than ever. I would have rather have kept the resolution alive, but I fully suspect we'll get a new resolution. That's part of the plan that Susie set forth that we agreed to, was the steps, and one of them will be to bring back a resolution. So I see that as separate from what I took your reminder to be, which is...
And it was separate. Just, because
sure.
Alderman Tierney
Right.
mentioned it, I threw it in.
So I'd kind of like to entertain a motion or a sense of the Finance Committee that, in fact, small and minority business enterprise liaison does belong in the mayor's office. I also think, though, that analytic attention to that also belongs in planning and zoning. So I could certainly see where we move or put into the mayor's office a new position that is focused specifically on a subset of what the economic policy analyst is focused on, which is outreach and help. And the way Gavin is bringing back what Mike Myron did. Mike Myron was beloved by the business community because he would pitch in and say, here's what you need to do to get your permit from this, and I'm going to talk to that person, and I'm going to pave the way, and I'm going to make it easier for you to get in to a vacant business on Main Street or whatever. And what Ruby and others that filled that later on were supposed to be doing was giving special attention to women's business, was what it used to be, and minority businesses, and focusing on helping them through the process. And I do think that is, first of all, it's the policy of the mayor, but also a function that belongs in the mayor's office to give it that high level of emphasis. Alderman Savage?
Just to clarifying, just want to better understand your rationale for, so you're saying you think that the small minority business enterprise liaison should be in the mayor's office because it elevates those
Correct.
Duties.
Right.
Well,
and I'm saying
yeah.
it basically, from my perspective, disappeared under the current organization. I have no idea, I can't even remember who's in that job.
That's Hope.
Let alone having heard, well, I thought Hope isn't Hope doing?
No, she's underneath
she's
the economic
acting-
development
Hollis's?
manager, which was Hollis. And,
Well,
I mean, I mean, my fear is that it still disconnects it from the overall planning efforts.
Right.
Who they do deal with businesses and permitting. If somebody comes in with wanting to put in a business, they go to planning and zoning.
right.
And I think it kind of fits in the idea of having a one-stop shop for business permitting, which I know the mayor had run on, is having that all under planning and zoning. They come in, permits, learn where they can open, how it falls in with our comp plan. So I think I
Right.
kind of, I think I'm leaning towards having that in planning and zoning.
Right.
Mr. Chairman?
Alderwoman Timsky.
I just want to emphasize that the comp plan is going to be a huge framework for how we move forward. And I just think that that all should be considered when we evaluate where these positions should be. I don't think we want to divorce ourselves from the comp plan and planning and zoning. They have to be done together. We can't afford to have, an independent
Right.
direction.
I agree with you, and my sense is that is more of an analytic kind of thing that helps us craft the rather than a liaison outreach kind of function. But Susie, you had a...
I just want to, when I'm hearing you talk about what has been done in the past, about the planning permits and that whole role, the problem with that has been that the business has to walk into our office. There isn't an ability or a role or a recent past obligation or assignment or whatever you want to call it for going out and finding. And I think we need to, when you talk about what you want to do, yes, analytics are important. Yes, including in all of our planning documents, the economic piece is important. I don't think you lose one to get the other. But what definitely is missing is an urgency to be aggressive about businesses coming to Annapolis. We are competing with every other city, town, certainly in Maryland and around.
Right.
And we want to be competitive about that. And I want to also just mention that when we get to talking about the programs that we're hoping to do that are listed under enhancements,
Right.
many of those programs relate to minority businesses in Annapolis. Teaching, recruiting, supporting. It would be our hope that we could put our economic development effort together and see what we can do with it. If we're a failure at it, then, it can go in any other direction. But if we put it in different places in the planning department or anywhere else, you can't hold us accountable for not being able to put it together. I mean, we're trying.
Right.
Jobs, businesses in Annapolis. And that includes all the communities that are in Annapolis. We want to be inclusive of all those communities and what they're trying to do, and what we have certainly analyzed, if you want to use that word, as what is missing. So I think you would see this as a combination of sort of the mayor's office being entrepreneurial in general.
So I believe we heard that message loud and clear, and I characterized your comments as saying you need more of the economic policy analyst kinds of things. I think we have further supported that by saying, yes, the small and minority business enterprise liaison is a function in the mayor's office that needs to be emphasized. I totally agree with you that it coalesces nicely with the enhancements that are here. And so I think there's support for that. My worry, and I think expressed by others, is it's at the expense of the kinds of long-term analytics supporting the comp plan and sector studies that does belong in planning and zoning. So we need to see when we get to planning and zoning how we're going to backfill it. But I think what's formulating in my mind is kind of a 50-50 response. Yeah, let's definitely move small minority business liaison out of planning and zoning into the mayor's office. I think we still need to think about backfilling that in planning and zoning, because it is an important subset of developing a comprehensive plan, but not the economic development analytics. So, and that's just me speaking, and I'm told I'm doing too much of that, but I think that's the sense that I drew from your comments, and I'm subscribing to that. I don't know where we are on the rest of the committee or with the rest of the council. We have a sense of a motion or action on the part of the Finance Committee, recommendation to our colleagues. Apparently not.
Well, you lost me about 10 minutes ago. I had half an hour ago, I had a motion. I thought I was going to make a motion to change the name of the position, and we've jumped to 5 different things since that time. I don't really understand why. I would still make my motion to change the word analyst to advisor.
Well, there's a position description for that job. I guess I would turn to the city, to Susie or Trish. Does the position description accommodate a name change from policy analyst to, what is it?
Policy advisor.
Advisor.
Are you talking about the contractual position, or are you talking about the economic development?
The contractual. We're talking about the contractual position.
The contractual position is not a title that is approved by you. It's not a title in the code. It's not a title that goes before the Civil Service Review Board. We can make that whatever we want it to be. It is not a title that you approve. You don't approve contractual employee titles.
All right, but it's an action that Alderman Theone.
Can I just say also, I don't have any problem with that change.
Yeah. And you can do it yourself.
Right, I could do it myself. But,
make it so.
Yeah, right, but I certainly,
all right.
I agree that can be, that using analyst has other connotations.
Right. Is that satisfactory?
It's fine with me.
All right.
So, Mr. Chair, do you want, I'd be willing to make a motion that we keep it as it's written here.
All right. Is there a second?
To what?
Keep it as it's written.
Not the title, but the positions.
Yeah, my motion didn't go to the position
Right.
itself, it was only to the title.
Alderwoman Finlayson is making a motion to accept this,
The mayor's
the
recommendation.
mayor's recommendation. Is there a second?
The mayor's recommendation,
In other words, moving, in this instance, we're talking specifically about moving economic development and small and minority business liaison from planning and zoning, planning and zoning to the office of the mayor.
no, I'm not going to second that.
Nor will I. Is there an alternative motion?
I thought I made a motion to change, well, never mind. We're going to take care of that otherwise.
Alderman, your motion was to change the title. We said we could do that without.
Yes,
having a motion.
I understand.
So,
All right, we'll put this on the parking lot to come back to, but I don't agree with this. I particularly don't agree with the economic development manager, which was Hollis's position, and I certainly want to fill the, Hope is filling the position in planning and zoning, but we may need to revisit that in terms of what the job is, so.
well, and to take small and minority businesses out of the planning department is what you're suggesting, to leave it in the planning department.
No,
Well, if you don't
well,
want
I
to
wanna-
make the change, you
I
want
want
to
it-
keep it the way it is.
I want it both places.
Okay, so,
So-
you can't have it both ways.
Well, we have it in planning and zoning now. I would suggest that both of those positions stay in planning and zoning, but I would support a position in the office of the mayor for small and minority business enterprise liaison. So I'm supporting that. I don't support the economic development manager. I think that's a different kind of work. It's not a liaison work. So I do think in planning should have a person who is devoted to looking at small and minority businesses in development of comprehensive plans, sector studies, all of those things. I think that should be an order of emphasis in planning and zoning.
Well,
I
are we
think
going
the
to have...
liaison and outreach is totally legitimate and appropriate to be in the mayor's office.
So you want to create a new position?
I want to keep those positions in planning and zoning. I would be a new position in the mayor's office that is small and minority business liaison.
Mr. Chair,
Is the planning department going to come before us
Yes,
on Monday?
What-
So maybe they should get to weigh in on this.
right?
We're talking
we-
in circles.
All right. Alderman Savage?
just quick, I think, so the Small Minority Business Enterprise Liaison I think that's the current title,
What is that?
the Small and Minority Business
Yes.
Enterprise Liaison, and that's currently in Planning and Zoning. So you're proposing to keep it there, but also create another Small Minority Business Enterprise Liaison, or to...
Okay, that's my thinking. I think it's important in both places. I think it's a different kind of role in one place than the other. I think here it is liaison, and liaison is appropriate in the mayor's office. I think it should be an economic development person who is focused on small and minority business in the planning and zoning department. And that is particularly essential as we develop the next comprehensive plan. I want somebody there that is responsible for paying attention to those things as we develop the next comp plan.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure why there wouldn't be adequate input from the position in the mayor's office during those processes, during the creation of the next comp plan. I mean, that's not done in a vacuum, so everybody has input. But to have two positions, two small and minority business positions, whether they're called liaisons or not, is only going to add to confusion and lines of authority. So who's doing what, who's got, you know, we're bouncing around terms like analytical and that kind of thing. And we're not looking at really what's going to make it work best.
Well, I don't accept your proposition. I think that I would hope that there's cross-pollination from the mayor's office, but I see liaison as a very different kind of job. It is the outreach kind of function that Susie has talked to us about, and that there's insufficient people to do that. I accept that. I agree with that. But I see that as out and about. I see that as attending some of these functions that are part of the enhancement and so on. That's not sitting at your desk working on development of the comprehensive plan.
Well, that's not the small minority business person's focus either. I think you know, maybe we don't want this position. You know, maybe we really don't want to focus on building small and minority businesses in our city. Okay? Because I'm not hearing that, you know, this person isn't going to sit at a desk all day, no matter where they are, he or she is. But the whole idea, from my understanding from years past, is that their focus, his or focus, will be on bringing and maintaining, keeping small and minority businesses in the city. Okay, comp plan is just one piece of that. And
so I think it's unfair to say we don't want it. Actually,
well, I think it's unfair for you to misrepresent what I was saying too, but you know, it is what it is.
We're talking about doubling the number of people devoted to it.
But
how is that not wanting it?
Well, because you're diminishing one position so you can create another position. Because the word liaison is there, doesn't mean that that position doesn't have analytical authority or, you know, can't do that job. Right. So, you know, clearly we're not getting anywhere with this. Should we move on?
Yes, I think we should. So, are there other comments on the proposed staffing summary? I think we've handled most of those. Is it time to go on and look at?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just one thing, and I don't want to, I know there's already legislation in about this, so we don't need to belabor the point, but just the environmental policy advisor reorganization I do have issues with, but I don't want to belabor the point now if it's going to be discussed later.
All right. I agree that it's still an open issue. And when we bring legislation back to KIA, I want to see Charter Amendment 6 also brought with that legislation, because it will be the point of discussion between the ordinance.
What's Charter Amendment 6?
That's the one to create the Department of Environment.
So are you trying to attach it to the budget?
I'm saying that we need to discuss it at the same time we discuss the ordinance that addresses the the Office of Legislative Policy, wherever that, I don't remember the ordinance name, it's in here. So we're now moving on to looking, there's currently an Office of Environmental Policy. I misspoke, sorry. Environmental Policy. All right, let's look at the numbers.
Ms. Sutherland has a question, I think.
Yes. All right. So we have a budget summary for the City Council. Seems pretty
we're
straightforward.
A big ticket item, I'm just saying.
Pretty straightforward to me. Is there, we have supplies, and that's primarily our travel, 1,500 times 8. All right, the Office of the Mayor, it's basically going from $1 million in salaries in 18 to $1.5 million. I think that's consistent with the proposed increases in staff, assuming we're going to agree to at least most of the proposed increases in staff. I think we just accept that as the math from the finance director, what those things will cost.
Well, it looks like 5 positions, but that's not really increases. So how many actual new positions?
Well, in the office of the mayor,
I don't think there are any new positions
right,
at all. They're all just transferring from other places.
right. So
Okay.
it would have shown up in other places, now it's showing up in the mayor's office. So we have what could on the surface be argued is a big increase, but when you add 5 new staff with their salaries and benefits, it seems,
So that
appropriate.
$500,000 is coming from other places in the budget, but it's not new money.
right.
Okay.
If you didn't have it here, it would be allocated to another budget.
So, for the record, you will have pension costs for the 2 contractual positions that become
Exempt.
community
Right,
services specialists.
right.
And then on the environmental policy advisor position, the director of the Office of Environmental Policy is currently a grade 20
Right.
and not at the
Down to
maximum for the scale. This makes it a grade 17. The incumbent is above the maximum for a grade 17. So that position would be frozen at its current salary until the grade 17 scale caught up. If it remains as a grade 20 position, as it is right now, the cost to the budget would be approximately $30,000 that we would have to either cut from somewhere else or raise revenue to pay for.
Right. Thank you for that elaboration and clarification. But from the Finance Committee perspective, I would argue that these increases are appropriate given the staffing increases and the normal increase in cost of doing business. We're talking about approximately $400,000.
But they're not actual increases. They're just
They're-
moving
it's-
from another place in the
Exactly.
budget.
Right.
Except for
Okay.
the
Except for the-
items that the city manager just outlined.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
All right, and then we have the PEG, which is a new emphasis for the PEG. The PEG is the PEG. Is there anything in particular we should be paying attention to, City Manager?
And I would
or
add, it's
Finance
not a new emphasis, it was a fund last year.
Yes.
Tell us what PEG is again, please.
Public education government access, or something like that.
So COATV.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So I'm glad everybody else has asked that same question, because I did too. I think that this was buried in the old way of showing things in the pro forma. It was always there. This isn't anything new. Although, I guess the question is, why is there nothing in 18? Did we not do anything in 18?
In 18, PEG was buried in the general fund.
Right. So,
And I don't know they had any spending in 18. They are spending a bit in 19 and getting ready to make some improvements there. So they will be utilizing some of the existing money. And what's carrying over is the 20 amount you see there.
right.
So as you go through this, where in 18 you had some restricted monies buried in the general fund or in some revolving fund that wasn't budgeted, et cetera, you're not going to see anything for 18.
Right. So, are there any observations, questions? Projected or adjusted 19 shows $500,000. We're going down to 137. I don't,
Is that because of the new equipment that we purchased in 19? And so we don't need to buy any new equipment for 20?
good morning.
Hello, how are you? So there was a larger amount of money that had carried over year after year in PEG funds that were spent down between the TV studio and the Office of Emergency Management in this last budget cycle. And now they are spending less because a lot of the upgrades, moving the TV station from analog to digital signal, doing some of the things at OEM. Those are already taken care of. That's not an annual expense. It's a one-time expense.
Great, thank you. Is that?
Yeah, and just as a brief aside, when we have to go out, as our aging population will sometimes need to, for surgeries or whatever, they now have the technology to allow us to participate from remotely, let's just say.
Well, there's the aging population, and there's you.
Yes, that's right.
You're
I
not
don't
part
age.
of that group.
Who are you talking?
All right, the last thing we have here is the enhancements. They seem like they're straightforward in the amounts. Do you want to give us some of the philosophy behind them?
The list of enhancements are in part creating a second year for very successful programs, the festivals, the Day of the Dead. These are engagement or One Annapolis, whatever you want to call it, programs. This year's emphasis is on what assists economics of citizens in our city, whether it's getting a GED or bringing in Hispanic businesses or teaching them how to start a business. And so you see in these programs an emphasis on the economics of the city, the economics of individuals. You also see in the continuing, we have a Naptown program continuing, very successful, dealing with the opioids, establishing information for the whole county, but certainly for our city that was not there before, continuing what will probably be another phase, different phase than what we've been doing. There's no alternative in the city, and that's the case for several of these proposals. It's not as though it can be in some other department. There isn't any other department. And when it relates to a African American or Hispanic community, we want to be able to have the tent of the city services expand to their needs, to their interests, and bring them into the tent of the Annapolis city government. So I think if you want to ask about any of the particulars, obviously Will is here and can answer, or I can, if you have any questions about any one of these programs.
Okay.
Most of these are well tried now, and we know which ones were successful and which ones were not particularly. So this is our ongoing intent to propose for this coming year.
Alderman Paone.
Thank you. How do you measure success of these programs?
We measure success, of course, by how many people, I should let Will answer this too, how many people we engage, and whether or not it adds to what the city of Annapolis is able to do for all of its citizens. These are outreach programs by and large, and they are addressing communities or needs that are not addressed other places, and so we continue them. I would say just one other thing, and then I'll let Will answer. When you have, for example, the first Day of the Dead event, and you have hundreds of people, or when you have the Festival of Flowers, and you have hundreds of people, these are people who are our citizens, You don't see them at council meetings. You don't see them, maybe you don't see them in other places where we have people, we have city activities. We are bringing them under the tent. We are enabling them to see their city as important to them and providing for them in some cases. And I'll let Will, probably has a...
Good morning and nearly afternoon, just as a time check. As an overarching strategy, One Annapolis and outreach efforts were originally framed by the mayor and ultimately by you all as incumbent council persons and you're currently sitting council members. It was established, I would say, 2 or 3 years ago, and if you all recall, several community members, as well as myself, came with Mayor Panelides and some of the other previous council persons to talk about both sides of the ledger. So remember, part of our conversation is we are investing an incredible amount of money in law enforcement and some of the other sides. And one of the challenges I brought up maybe 3 years ago was, can we look at kind of balancing that as to how do we invest in people and in communities so that hopefully 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road, we're able to see a shift in the amount of money we're spending on kind of containing and dealing with enforcement stuff, on actually building the power and elevating the voice of some people in multiple communities. Now, a lot of the conversation, even in today's paper about the budget and framing One Annapolis, a lot of the conversation, by no fault of anyone other than maybe their proximity to kind of the nuts and bolts of what we do, a lot of it has been focused on festivals and events. And one of the questions you asked, Alderman Arnett, was kind of our return on investment and kind of how we manage or measure success, which is extremely important because whenever you invest anything in anything, you want to have, you want to be able to see what the impact of that investment is. So the festivals and events are one aspect, one strand of outreach efforts. And the reason why I wanted to talk about kind of the overarching feel or tom of One Annapolis is that that's one part of it. Another key part of it is comes from the earlier and first community engagement sessions that we had. And those community engagement sessions weren't a social hour or a way for us to kind of meet and greet people. They actually, in breakouts, helped us listen and hear what citizens, African Americans, Latinos, and others, so our entire Annapolis community, it allowed us to hear what their primary concerns or priorities were. And a lot of those were gaps in services. Now, we have a fire department and a police department. Obviously, we do not have the resources nor infrastructure in the mayor's office to create another department of outreach or any of those other services. We also have a county that provides human services. So what we identified in those earlier sessions were, what are the areas and ways that we as a city can kind of support citizens in areas that the county didn't and other services didn't provide? So what came out of that was a work plan that I developed along with our 2 staff persons that identified some of those gaps. One of those were convening opportunities for community members. So when you have Day of the Dead, when you have our diaspora that we had this past weekend, those were social opportunities that combined both cultural, geographic, as well as economic opportunities for community members, for marginalized communities to come together. That's why we have vendors usually at each of those things, and we have community members who speak. And Alderwoman spoke at our last event this past weekend, and that was or the weekend before, and that was awesome. So it gives us an opportunity to bring community members together around areas that they earlier identified. So as you go through that list and you see things, I'll pull out one. The most obvious and low-hanging fruit are something like GED courses, which you could say, you know, could we get the school system, could we get Anne Arundel Community College? And that's exactly what we're doing. We're partnering with those entities to be able to come into communities because it was identified that that is one way for us to move the needle when we talk about the ability for people to enter the workforce and ultimately be able to support our larger budget by being taxpayers, right? Contributing to the system. And one way we've identified with doing that is being able to go right to the source. So I could go through each of these and itemize each of these, but I don't want to take too much of your time unless you have specific questions about them. But I wanted to kind of frame why programmatically each of these things were being introduced, and they were being introduced, bless you, they were being introduced so that we could actually, all of us, because one thing in a lot of newspaper articles and a lot of kind of the messaging of what One Annapolis is, we need to be very clear, or I like to be very clear, that it is, though it appears to be mayor-centric, it's actually meant to support each ward and each of you all. So hopefully moving forward with each of these programmatic pieces, what we're doing is we're finding things that are ward-specific that allow the citizens who live in your ward to know that you are, as representatives and kind of fiscal agents of their ward, to meet their needs that are outside of some of those other larger boxes. Like we know streets and other things of that nature that they readily focus on for you all. But I can say each of you all, in conversations I've had with you, know that in each of your wards, there are people that, you know, might have some other needs that we can help fulfill that don't cost $1 million. Lastly, in the budget item and in the line items and some of the brackets that I proposed and put forward, and thus our Chief of Staff and Teresa, there's an asterisk that denotes that we are seeking matching funding, which we've always done. So even though hopefully you all are providing funding for these activities, we are seeking grants and we are seeking public-private partnership investment in this. So hopefully it will be double or 3 times as much from what you allocate. So thank you for your time.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes. I totaled it up and it comes to $47,200, which is a very small amount of money for...
Hardly offsets 9.6 million for police.
So it's not a lot of money to move forward with the Mayor's One Annapolis initiative.
Okay.
But I do have some questions and some concerns, to be honest with you. There seems to be some overlap. You know, the mayor's office is putting on concerts, music series, and the like, and we have Arts in Public Places that does the same thing.
Right.
So how are you interfacing with that organization specifically?
Right.
So that you're not duplicating or you're not drawing money away from one for another?
Right. Okay, so that's a very good question. So being that I did previously work very closely with Arts in Public Places, with boards and commissions, we rarely do any event without partnering with the chair as well as others in Arts in Public Places. What we've realized and what I've personally known based on proximity to their budget and their struggles is they don't totally have a huge pot of money to work with. So along with partnering, what we're able to do is kind of find other ways and other partners to kind of bolster both of what we do. That's one thing. The other thing is with Arts in Public Places, they have an agenda of based on their commission that they establish. So let's say they do concerts at City Dock, at Susan Campbell, or other areas. One of the issues or challenges is that the cultural aspect of how they're framing their concerts don't necessarily bring the external or outside or outlying communities from the downtown. Hopefully the hope with this is that in a year or two, what you'll find is the two of those culturally will be able to blend in, and we can say, this is Arts and Public Places agenda, musical agenda, or cultural arts agenda moving forward. But right now, it's kind of like they're separate streams. Does that make sense?
I see it very clearly.
Yeah.
And that's my concern.
Right.
Because we're going to have our functions, and you're going to have your functions, and maybe somewhere down the road, we'll come together.
Well, we do come together.
Well,
You mean fiscally?
I'm talking about the concerts. I understand the concerts at Whitmore Park, which was started by, I guess it was We Care, but I'm not even sure.
Yeah, this is Larry.
And then we have Arts and Public Places and now the mayor's office, all doing concerts and not coming together. I don't understand why you wouldn't merge with Arts and Public Places, who does have a bigger budget. I mean, not a whole lot, but they have a budget.
Right.
And they've asked for an increase so that they can expand on what they do. But what I'm hearing is making me uncomfortable, because what I'm hearing is, let's keep one set of concerts downtown for one segment of our community, and let's do something else for another segment of our community,
right,
instead of us bringing our community together in one Annapolis.
Right. So,
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to that too? I think
Sheila's directing a question.
Well, yes, please.
One of the things that we have found over this last year is that in order to bring communities into city activities, we need a recruiting piece. So we need flyers. We need, going to the communities in different ways. So providing, no matter, if we provided, say, just a concert with none of that recruiting part, we don't bring in new communities into and we don't compete with the concerts. I mean, I think concerts might be the only thing where there might be some duplication, but we are working with them. We're not competing with them.
And well, what I'm seeing, and I'm going to go down the list, because we don't have enough information, but I'm not seeing, and I didn't hear from Mr. Rowell, that you're merging with Arts and Public Places and you're going to do the outreach for them. What I heard was, we're going to have our separate concerts, okay? And I would like to see the groups coming together and working together on these projects, okay? That's my interest. If we're really talking about One Annapolis, and it has nothing to do with outreach or, PR for the events, because we know that's going to have to take place on both fronts, or all three fronts if there's three different groups. But I would like to see the groups come together and do concerts together in the name of the city.
All right, and we do. And we do. So, again, the Arts and Public Places, they have a very clear agenda and concert series that they do.
It changes every year.
And when we're honest, we realize that their lineup of performances that they do are not utterly inclusive, and this does not fault them at all.
Okay, and
it does not fault them at all.
And that is my point exactly.
Right.
So what is the mayor's office doing?
So what we do, in line with all of our other outreach efforts, what we've identified is millennials and younger people who, if I walk up, I'm being totally honest, like my daughter, and I walk up and I go, hey, there's a classical music concert happening at Campbell, at the park downtown at City Dock. Come down there with me and hang out. What happens is she's like, no, I'm good, and she listens to classical music. What we realized is, and what we wanted to do, and I talked to Cynthia Cruson about this, the chair, is we say, hey, there's an excellent opportunity with low overhead for us to do a small concert series at Truxton Park for young people by the pool who already go to Truxton Park, who go to the skate park there. They get to pick their lineup of music because we're all old around here. They pick their lineup of music. And then Arts in Public Places.
Mr. Rao, you're misrepresenting Arts in Public Places, okay? Because they have a variety of concerts.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So all I am asking is that you bring those two groups together.
And that's what we do. That's what I was trying to say, is that we do that.
But that's what I'm asking you to do. To
Yes.
bring the groups together.
Absolutely.
I see sports clinics.
Yes.
So who's doing the sports clinics? Is it Rexham Park, or is it the mayor's office doing the sports clinic?
I put a narrative.
And we don't have a narrative.
Oh, because I submitted a narrative.
Okay, so is it in the packet we just got today?
Yeah.
Okay. Going down the list, workforce development. We have a partnership with the Community Action Agency. Is this in partnership with the Community Action Agency? Same thing with professional development. We have a partnership with OIC, who does GED training. So are we doing it? Is OIC doing it? We're doing our separate things, or are we merging together with them? The diaspora, the concert that was last week, and I attended. Arts in Public Places again, okay? The African American Business Luncheon, is that part of economic development?
Yes.
Which, is it the
We had it
mayor's part,
yesterday. We had one
or
yesterday.
is it economic development or planning and zoning part?
So to answer your question, because each of these are curated and well-researched, thought out, and written. So I can answer each of those questions.
Okay, well, what I would like,
okay,
and we may have it if it's in this big packet that you all gave us today.
Yes, ma'am.
A description of what the event is.
Yes, ma'am.
Who your partners are, and who the what the outcome is. You know, most of these events you've had this year. So we, as Alderman Payon has said, we need to know how many people were touched. You know, how many real participants are in the NapTown programs. We know that there are an awful lot of service providers attending, but how many people were we actually reaching, and is it making a difference? And we don't expect it to solve our drug problem in a year, but we do expect to have some record of the success of the program. That's what we're asking. Now, all that set aside, the one thing that really bothers me is the fact that we want to treat police as a separate entity, as if they are only here to arrest people. That goes against all of our efforts for community policing. You know, I had that discussion with the NapTown group, and some of them came back to me because I was told that the group voted to not include the police in any of their activities. But some of the providers came back to me and said, we really wanted and felt the need for the police to be partners with us.
The providers said that?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, the providers are not who is not the...
Well, they're part of the group.
Yeah.
They're part of the group that's meeting weekly, monthly, whenever, however, who aren't feeling comfortable that their voice is being heard. I'm just relaying this to you. We are trying to promote...
I want to understand what you're saying.
Okay,
that whose voices are not being heard? The police department?
When we had the very first NapTown engagement in my ward.
Yes.
And I was told that the police were not allowed to be there, and if they did come, they couldn't come in uniform.
Absolutely.
Because there was they did not want them to be identified. And I said, that goes against our efforts for community policing. We don't want the police to be only seen as the, people to come in to arrest you. We want to see them as our help, our security, the people we can go to, when something is wrong. And I was told that that committee did not want the police involved. Okay? And then several of the members of the committee at other times came back and said that was not the case, because they work with the police and their outside agencies as partners.
Yeah. Okay?
So all I'm saying is we need to rethink whether we really want community policing to work in the city.
Right.
And if we do, everything we should be doing should move us in that direction.
Okay, so
The
can I
police
respond?
The police should not be treated as the bad guys.
Okay.
And I think they all felt that way, and I hope that's beginning to change. But in what I've seen here and what I heard you say earlier, the police are not invited to be participants, and they need to be partners. We wouldn't do that to the fire department or to the Office of Emergency Preparedness. The police have a vital role, and we have a responsibility to help the community embrace them as the community policing model dictates. That's all I'm saying.
I would absolutely, there is very little in that I would disagree, and I'm not in a position to make those decisions. I would say, just for clarity, which is somewhat philosophical but more esoteric, is that so the partners that are involved in something like the opioid epidemic are partners that are county entities, state entities, and others.
Well aware.
Right, and so the primary focus of most community work, with the ultimate goal being better police-community relationships. Personally, that's something that, for all of this, is what we want. What we did realize is how communities perceive and relate to the police department, where they are right now, is not exactly where we need it to be. And what we realize is, for our target population, which are people currently dealing with substance abuse issues, and those that are that have experienced traumatic experiences with their family and in their communities, we realize that having uniformed police officers and having police vehicles and armed police officers, when we're asking them to come into a safe space to talk about not only what happens with them with their criminal justice history, which is why we always include expungement, because our attempt is to destigmatize mental health issues as it relates to substance abuse. And in attempting to destigmatize that, what we clearly wanted to do, again, not against the police department, what we wanted to do was very clearly delineate dealing with substance abuse issues from the criminalization of drug use. Does that make sense? So if you have someone who's an alcoholic...
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
but I want to know...
So it wasn't meant to demonize or separate. We just wanted to create a safe space.
And so how do you fix this?
Well,
what's the next step?
Right, so the next phase, and why it's in here for this, the next phase is to incorporate where we were in the past to bringing the police department in and some of their models. So I'm in constant contact with all of our community police officers, as well as our acting chief, to figure out how we can now converge strategies as opposed to separating them. But it was never to say we don't want the police department involved in anything. We can't get any of that work done. But I mean, am I making any sense?
I'm just telling you what the message was.
It was the trust factor, right? It was the trust factor.
I understand.
Saying, hey, we want you all to come talk about your issues that are extremely personal. And we needed to be sure that they developed trust with us first, to not betray that by investigating them or looking into, because, unfortunately, substance abuse for a lot of people in communities everywhere around the world, it does have a part of it that is criminal, right? That has a criminal element, whether it's being addicted and having to steal or rob. And we wanted to, to kind of say, come into this space so we can deal with that, and then we'll bring in support services to help you. Right?
You understand the problem.
Yes, absolutely.
And I will look forward to how you're bringing the community together.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Payon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have several questions that I want to ask. The first couple have to do with your title and your duties. I would note that you are the Arts and Veterans Liaison. What does a Hispanic business?
I have no idea who.
That's Max.
Are you trying to change me up?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be Max Huber.
You all look alike.
Yeah.
I would never say that, but, well, what is your title, sir?
Senior Advisor and Public Relations and Community Engagement.
Okay. I don't see that anywhere under the staffing positions of the mayor's office.
Yeah. So it's community engagement. If you look for, if you look for somewhere under community engagement.
All right. Well, that answers.
Yeah.
Certainly answers that. But I do have some further questions about those. I'll get back to them in a minute.
Okay.
The diaspora, the Day of the Dead, the Flower Festival. From what I understand, at least the Flower Festival and the Day of the Dead were very successful events, and I certainly would like to see them again. But I do have some questions about why we are funding them to the extent that we are. I've got no problem with funding them to the extent of, waiving fees that might be owed to the city for closing a street or that sort of thing. And I've got no problems with the city making a financial contribution to that, but it seems like a bit much, frankly. We're talking Day of the Dead and the Flower Festival, $6,500. I mean, the Sons of Italy have an Italian festival every year without the help of the city other than to waive a few fees. I'd say the same thing about the Oktoberfest in West Annapolis every year. Again, the city waives the fees for closing down the street, but they don't sponsor the event. They don't pay for the event.
Yeah.
And I understand making a contribution.
Yeah.
I got no problem with that.
Right.
At least as a compromise. I understand that there's certain groups we need to encourage and I have no problem with backing up, but I do have a problem with paying for the entire thing. I would say similarly about the Hispanic business breakfast and the African American business lunches. I mean, I think we certainly need to encourage economic development in both of those communities, but I don't know that we need to pay for everybody's breakfast and everybody's lunch. And again, no problem with the contribution and being regarded as a sponsor. We do that for any number of events. Well, but I just don't understand why we would be paying for the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, most of these things, I got to tell you, are great. GED, the Startup Annapolis, professional development, workforce development, they're great. I mean, I got no problem at all with anything like that. But these trouble me a bit.
And so what troubles you, just so that I'm clear, are the contributions to cultural events?
Why are we paying for a flower festival?
Well, I want to be clear so that we're on the same page. Your contributions to cultural events, you feel that the city should not contribute to cultural events. And I'm asking that question because when you talk about the Oktoberfest or some other festivals.
Well, I'm looking at $3,500 for the Day of the Dead. I'm looking for the diaspora, which, by the way, a number of us on the council regarded as a bit of a pie in the face, since we had the Monday before not granted the peddler's permit and made it very clear that we didn't think that there was adequate preparation, and there were months and months and months to have us go over this, and all of a sudden at the last minute we're being asked to approve that. We don't, and then they turn around and go, oh, well, now we're going to be inside, even though it was a sunny day.
So you're making public statements. As you make these statements, you have to allow me to be able to respond with factual things.
Well, you have to allow me to finish making my point.
I was trying to follow the things that you were saying. So the first thing that you said was you are not sure. Well, you don't agree with the city, because I want to be clear, contributing to cultural events.
No, I said I do agree with the city contributing. I don't agree with the city paying entirely for these particular events. I mean, we're making, this is,
So-
on the scale of things, Alderwoman Finlayson's absolutely right. You could add all these together, and it's really a drop in the bucket. I suppose it's
Yeah,
on
and I wanna-
principle that we, why are we paying this kind of money for entertainment, basically?
So, okay, so to answer your question.
And I'm also playing the devil's advocate to some
I know,
extent.
I know.
I'm a lawyer. Come on.
Yeah.
I don't, try a lawyer. I don't get
I'm
to
with you.
question
I'm
people
with
very
you.
often.
So to be clear, these are events that were done the first part of the administration. We realized again that there was a need for targeted cultural events to bring aspects of the community who, we have the Kunta Kinte Festival, which we all know we've had trouble.
For years. Well, yeah.
Right. I mean, we've had trouble even in these chambers fully actualizing and realizing whatever investment or contribution we're making to that. What we realized is we wanted to bolster and help support cultural events in the city for marginalized communities. The reason why I asked you, and I wanted clarity, is because if the amount is 6,000 or 3,000, we wanted to be very clear in terms of the cost of other investments specifically to some of those communities, i.e. Hispanic community, African American community. And what we realized is that we did it last year. We realized we will do these events without any money. We didn't have a budget at all because we realized the importance of beginning the process of bringing those communities into the fold, right, for the greater good. So we did them without any contribution from the city. And they were successful. So the example that we pointed out was our Flowers Festival. That was just amazing. And it was beautiful to watch that.
And that's been done before, or was you referring to
So we
this
did
year's?
Day of the Dead. Okay. So what I mean is, in Hispanic-centered or Hispanic-centered event, right, to bring that community together, we realized that it's incredibly successful. We got a lot of feedback from families, from churches, from communities that said, hey, this is something that's really positive and really good for this community. Doesn't involve MS-13. It's not talking about immigration. We have families that are coming together and sharing their culture. So we realized that was successful. So the hope is that we create an event with low overhead that the city's not paying for. I think it's a couple thousand. It cost way more than that to do it. But we had a lot of contribution from private citizens as well as people who really wanted to see it done, including Arts in Public Places and others who contributed their time and energy to get it done. That's one thing. On the African American side, the hope was we have events that are time honored, like the MLK Parade, right? The MLK Parade, which goes downtown, we have good turnout. We also realize that because it's normally in one of the coldest months of the year, right? You have a parade that happens, and unlike some other parades and festivals, everyone comes down, the parade goes then, and then it ends. Because it's cold, there's no convening mechanism at the end that allows people to come together and, kind of acknowledge, King's legacy and move it on. What we realized was, wouldn't it be completely awesome if we could have just anything, a choir sing or something at the end where people can come together and then we can close it out. So, this year, we were going to do it at Susan Campbell Park. It wasn't totally ill-conceived, but the idea and the feel behind it was meant to do exactly that. Now, your question about, or the statement about it being moved indoors or to the Stanton Center, the plan was always, if we couldn't do it because of weather or anything else downtown at Susan Campbell Park, the plan was always to do it indoors at the Stanton Center because it's closer to the community, people can walk, families can come. And I do thank you for coming because you were there, and and that means a lot to that particular community. So I do think it's a worthwhile investment for us to be able to, for you all and all of us to be able to say, that we are both having Oktoberfests, St. Patrick's Day, 4th of July, Eastport Marathon. I mean, we can go down the list that we are singling out one or two events in a 12-month period for some of those communities that we need to reach outside of our kind of comfort zone and bring them into the fold. Because I think it will benefit the city, it will benefit us, our bottom line, in terms of getting people to be more engaged citizens and hopefully become Annapolitans who own businesses and contribute to our tax base.
All right, so you're saying that these festivals, for example, the Flower Festival, we allowed them, presumably went rent-free to use the Pip Moyer Center. No problem with that at all. But the $3,000 that we contributed was not nearly the cost of the event, or not the cost of the event overall?
Well, we didn't contribute anything.
Okay.
As a city.
If it went so well this year with us contributing anything, not contributing anything, why do we have to contribute $3,000?
You know, I'm going to try to be careful here, but we have a commitment to the mayor's efforts on One Annapolis. I would say every single staff member has added money to that effort. We ask for money out in the community to try to get this whole effort going. We can't do that another time. This isn't a matter of there being established businesses or whatever that are going to underwrite them. Hopefully we'll get to that point. That really would be ideal, no question about it. But at this point, the city needs to be a financial backbone to being able to do this cultural outreach. I mean, I don't know which ones of you have been to these events, but when we are, for example, the Festival of the Flowers, when you see that we have, quite simply because of very dedicated staff members, created a plaza that families from all over Central America and Mexico see themselves in Annapolis as though this was part of not only their culture, their history, but their life experiences, perhaps. That endears them to our city. That makes them want to be a part of our city. And that's where we're going. But we can't keep just kind of trying to piece together this effort. We've identified, just a few programs. In the case of the Day of the Dead and the Festival of Flowers, these are new events in our city.
And I might say very successful from what I could tell.
Thank you for saying that. We felt that way too.
Success, I want to add up the measurement of success, though, from our vantage point is a little different than the measurement of success for people that live in communities. So we have to constantly remind ourselves that externally looking at it as success, real success is when you talk to mothers and you talk to teenagers and you talk to people who have lived here for 20 years and they may be bilingual and they are overjoyed because they've never felt like there was something that was for them, that was sanctioned by the city that they pay into and live in and call home. And I think that's the huge success is them being able to see members of our city council at various events that we've had, that this is what I've heard from actual people. It's a huge success when they actually feel like, hey, I matter in this sense. And I think that lends itself again to us really moving closer towards a really stronger, more rich, more vibrant city. And that is success to me. Right? Like if 5 people come and they believe that this city is really living up to its promise to them. I think we're far ahead.
Yeah, can I just add to what, adding to what Will is saying? It's probably because all elected officials go to many events. It may be, you reach out to your constituents and constituencies all the time. It probably is, doesn't register how important it is when you go to their house, which is essentially what we're doing. This means a huge amount. So I want to reinforce Will's comment about your participation. We wouldn't be moving this along if we didn't have everybody working on it as you all have this last year. Just the being there, speaking to, some of the people don't even know who you were until there you are. You're coming to an event that's important to them. We want to continue that. Excuse me again.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to give myself some time now. First of all, I thank you both for your comments and questions and for your responses. These kinds of activities are part of the reason the mayor was elected. This should not be a surprise. I guess what's a surprise to me is the request is as modest as it is. Yeah. And I took to heart what you said, Will, that you are seeking matching things. It's well known in our community grants section that you have to have a local government contribution in order to enable the leveraging to get money from elsewhere. And so this is a statement that the city is supporting activities like this, and it allows you to go look for supplemental funds. And so I appreciate all of that.
Thank you.
I look at the numbers and they're sort of rounded and so forth. And I guess I want to ask from a budget perspective, is this a bolus of money, $47,200, that we will be making available to you so that if one of these things, say summer music series, becomes $3,200, you're short 200, or are you going to be able to play back and forth within this bolus of money to carry on these activities?
Yeah, I want to ask the first part. So that's a very good question. So because a lot of these are somewhat piloted line items, what you should expect, what you all should expect with any money that's allocated for this is a detailed work plan and a detailed scope of work that that points to exactly which activities are going to be undertaken and what cost there is to that activity. So to your point, going over or just kind of just rounding it out and saying we did this and we need this much is not acceptable and shouldn't be acceptable because it's not fiscally sound. The last thing I'll add to it is these items were put on there in order for it to be sustainable, and the sustainability part means that as a pilot, what we're looking to do is really be sure it has a foundation so that maybe as time moves on, it is self-sustaining. Right. It isn't something that's,
Okay, so
can I just add on that because as the supervisor and chief of staff, I am going to hold the staff to the numbers that we have in your enhancement descriptions.
You're tougher than I wanted to be.
Yeah, I am. I want it because that's how we get to both accountability and measurement of what we're doing.
Okay.
So it is very important to me, and it's very important to the mayor, that we stay with, if one of these programs, for example, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if we figure out we cannot do it, then we won't do it. I mean, we're going to make every effort to go to produce what we say we're going to produce by the description and to stay in the budget we've proposed. That's really the only way that is honorable, in my view, to our request.
I appreciate that. I was certainly willing to be more lenient, but I wanted to talk to the finance director and city manager. I see this, and Will, this is how you characterize it, as a counterbalance to the amount of money we spend for public safety. It's a pretty small counterbalance.
Yeah, I mean, you can increase it if you like.
And I agree, well, I agree with Alderwoman Finlayson that this, we really need to be thinking about community policing if we're going to do it and take it seriously as a very holistic kind of thing. All the pieces need to mesh. So again, it seems to me that this is a logical companion to that philosophy moving forward. The one request that I would make, and I think this is again reflecting what Alderwoman said, is we need a report on these things because we are your liaisons in our wards.
Right.
And we need to be able to, when our taxpayers say, all I see from you is tax increases, I never see any results, we need the ammunition to say, look, here's what's going on.
Some data.
Here's the kind of outreach, here's the kind of community building, these things. If you're going to tell me you're going to be a Scrooge and not want to support that, you elected the wrong guy to be your alderman or alderwoman. So I think this is part of touting the success stories, is that we get some kind of a continual update on what we're doing, how it turned out. You've talked about the great success of several of these without money, and maybe they'll even be better with money. So I guess I would turn to Alderwoman Tierney.
Thank you.
Before you move off that topic, I just want to say for the record, so you know, what you are appropriating is in the budget ordinance itself and at that level. So when you say, so the money for these initiatives is in Office of the Mayor, supplies and other costs. So if they had a savings here because some event didn't happen, they can use it for office supplies. If they had a savings in office supplies, they could use it for an event. This is your legal budget appropriation. What Susie said is your commitment from the mayor's office. But this is your legal budget appropriation.
Right. So you're saying it is more fungible?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is by department, salaries and benefits, contract services, supplies and other, contractual outlay.
That was my inclination.
I mean, capital outlay.
Right. But if you want to have a higher standard,
She's the manager of the department.
right, that's fine. Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, thank you. I just, maybe this is for the parking lot, but we do have an increase proposed for arts and public places, I believe long overdue, and art can be healing as well. And I had the advantage of hanging out in the mayor's office for several days and chatting with Max, who is sort of the liaison with the arts and public places. And I know he has had, he really wants them to focus, more on public art. And so I think there just has to be a conversation that we're not either going in two different directions, or that we can go in the same direction and not overlap. Or I think that's a discussion that has to be made. Where do we want them to go? And as I see, because you have festivals in here, I personally don't think that our arts and public places should, as wonderful as those concerts are, I think there's a lot more that they can do in the arts, in that your outreach with festivals and concerts would probably be more encompassing and well worth it. This number is probably a drop in the bucket for what it achieves, and because we have a ways to go. It's still we are not seen as we still have a ways to go, and I know that for personally in trying to reach out at the meetings that you have, and I hope to do more of that.
Thank you.
So thank you for those comments, and it brings up 2 points. One, to me, this is a lot like community grants. It's another approach. And I think we've always stinted on the money for community grants at our expense. But like community grants, I think getting the reporting and those sorts of things is an essential part of it. Likewise, I'm a disabled veteran of wartime. I would like to hear a report from Max about what he's doing for me. So, you know, because it is veterans and whatever the exact title
I
is.
can tell you this morning, he was with the mayor as they began the Wounded Warriors.
Right. And the point is,
that kind of
I'm
thing.
sure there's a million things going on, but just like I was asking Will to get a report so we can give it to our constituents, to the extent that we're armed with information, we can carry that out to our constituents. I'm having a town hall meeting tomorrow night. I doubt I'll get a question on this, but I want to be prepared to answer the questions about what are we getting for our money,
Right.
kind of thing. So my stomach tells me that it's time to wrap up on this particular thing. Are there any summary? Oh, and just one other thing, Will. Sheila and I have been talking. What you're doing in many senses, and what community policing might do in many senses, is referring people to outside agencies for support. And so Sheila and I have been talking about this notion. I don't want to speak for you, but I'll just say of creating in the city a Department of Community Services or some kind of function where we take care of our people here. That still may involve a lot of directing them to other resources, but I think that would make your job a lot easier too.
Yeah.
So it's not for this year's budget, but it is something that I think, so when we talk about community policing, to me that's moving from arrest to assist, and all of our assist is basically out there, and maybe we need to start shouldering some of the burden in here, so we know we have direct control over those sorts of services.
Right. And there also, I just wanted to add in terms of working with Kraus and others, and Patty Norris and others in the police department, is I've read a couple times at various elementary schools because they do amazing work in the school system as well, those the community police officers. But they're also, we've begun partnering with them on some of the sports clinics that you see in there. The police officers are playing, like they're having a team, and they're going to put some young people on the team with them, and they'll be playing against some of our staff and other community members. So it's a process by which we will begin showing the community that we're all on the same team, and we can be equally trusted, but we're getting there.
I want to just expand on the proposal to create this new department. It also should include, from my perspective, housing, because we have nothing in our city to push the initiative of workforce housing. We talk about it at every venue, but we don't have any source of direction. It would include job opportunities, and other training opportunities. So it's more of a social services kind of department, because we are not meeting the needs of all of our residents in any number of capacities. So that's definitely on our agenda. May I ask, City Manager, I know you can point me directly to it, where the community grants is in the budget, what page? I think Takia told me and I lost it. 60 something?
268.
It's in finance office? Okay.
That's the first page up.
And that's not
68?
Here it is. 65.
65, okay. So none of the monies that you're proposing is connected in any way to the community grants? That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's correct, okay, thank you.
All right. So if ever there was a time, a mayor under which we could consider this kind of a department or office or adjunct to the mayor's, it seems like this is the right time. So we'll develop that conversation more fully outside of this budget context, but put it in back here.
Is this intended for FY '20, or is it
I don't know that we have our thoughts fully combined for 20, but maybe for 21.
Okay.
Put it in the hopper with the mayor when he creates his next budget. All right. Other summary?
And I know,
Yes, thank you. Thank you for answering our questions.
Are we finished?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I asked you some pretty candid questions. You gave me some good candid answers. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right.
what is our plan? Are we working, my calendar said until 3.
Yes.
So we're working until 3. So are we going to order out for lunch?
I was going to walk down to Jimmy John's.
Yeah.
I got to stop
So we
by-
want to walk down and,
Yeah, stop by CVS for a minute anyway.
So we want to take a 30-minute break?
30-minute,
food?
yeah, 30-minute recess, and then
Okay.
we can reconvene.
Okay.
All right.
So I move to adjourn for 30 minutes?
Not adjourn, recess.
Recess, I'm sorry.
Right.
Second.
All right,
We'll be
Aye.
back at 1 o'clock?
yeah.
Okay.
And then I think we need to at least summarize where we are on this. God, I didn't know we were going to take so much.
I'm going to have to leave about 20.